All right, this is the standby. I forgot what day it was. The Monday, September 21st, 2015, meeting of the Planning Commission. We are hereby called to order. Please do the roll call.
Ms. Hockenberry?
Here.
Mr. Meeks?
Here.
Mr. Rankin? Ms. Rogers?
Here.
Ms. Teets?
Here.
Mr. Wodisco?
Here.
Thank you.
I'd like a motion to adopt the agenda.
So move. Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The agenda is adopted. Anyone with petitions for items not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll go right into old business. Well, I'm going to call this old business. This is I'm going to call this other business. We'll move on. No old business. We'll go right to new business. Number A, application for special use permit antenna at 1230 West Broad. Recommendation to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Mr. Chairman, members.
Well, actually, that was a good question. Are we handling these separately?
Yes, I think it's fine. You should handle them separately.
Fine.
Yes. Although they're very similar.
One's a low building. One's over.
Got it. Go ahead.
You have before you a special use permit to allow rooftop antennas at 444 West Broad Street. And this is an item which ultimately will go to the Board of Zoning Appeals. We're recommending that the Planning Commission recommend to the BZA.
Well, I did 1230 first, because that's the way it is on my agenda.
I'm sorry. Let me rearrange here. I have these all together.
Sorry.
This is U 1572-15, and this is for rooftop antennas at 1230 West Broad, Falls Plaza. This is the one-story shopping center that's in the western part of the city. Zone B1, the owner of the property is Federal Realty. They're requesting rooftop antennas that will allow better communication. This will go to the BZA, and so we are recommending that you recommend approval that the BZA approve it with appropriate screening.
Okay. Anyone? Questions?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
By appropriate screening, you mean rather than this, what is it called, the metal chimney thing? They would do a brick chimney?
Something that looks more substantial and would be consistent with the materials on the building. Now, whether you're not necessarily going to get a masonry wall, but there are lots of materials, lightweight, that look like brick or thin brick or some other kind of material.
Is this what you have in mind?
See if the applicant is here, because I think it'd be helpful to,
All right.
it would be helpful for the applicant to address what they believe they can do.
Would you please come to the chair and press the push button, and then the mic will turn on. Thank you.
Testing? Okay. We can do a stealth brick option that matches the brick that's on the facade of the grocery store. And this is actually one antenna. The antenna is 23 inches tall by 12 inches wide. So it's very, very small. This is a new technology for Verizon. It's called small cell. And the purpose is to kind of provide better cell phone service and data to smaller areas, especially heavily populated areas. So we're doing a lot of these small antennas on a lot of like smaller shopping plazas. And it's a good solution instead of doing a tower site and taking up a lot of space. This antenna takes up about 2% of the entire rooftop. So the rooftop is 83,000 square feet. Our antenna site is 87 square feet.
So is this your picture or our picture? Who's,
This is ours. We put this together. It's a photo simulation of what it would look like.
okay, fine. Okay,
Mr. Chairman?
yes.
Do you have someone who's going to do the motion, or would you like me to do it?
For the record, would you please state your name and any, who you're representing?
Yeah, my name is Julie Arnold, and I'm representing Verizon Wireless.
Thank you.
Ms. Arnold, are you representing Verizon Wireless in both of these
No,
instances? Okay.
just this installation.
I would like to move.
How complicated. Hang on one second. Let's see. Any more questions?
I have a quick question.
Yes.
From the drawings, it looks like it is partially hidden by some sort of parapet wall.
Yeah, so the way the installation is there's a pipe mount with the cylinder that's covering the antenna, and then there's also a separate platform. And both of them are located behind the existing parapet wall. And I'm sure you've seen the shopping center. It's where the Giant is. And you'll notice that it's kind of that parapet that's like that fake sloped roof. So the pipe's pretty set back on the roof.
So when I looked at the drawings, I was just trying to make sure. There looks like there's there's two pieces to this installation. One is the ballast mount detail I'm looking at, which looks different and is in addition to this pipe that we see that's sticking up.
Right. So
This
the
vent
ballast
pipe.
mount is
Right, this is the drawing I'm looking
yeah,
at.
and it's only 4 feet tall, so it will not be visible on the rooftop whatsoever unless you're above the roof looking down.
Sure.
Because it's set back and the parapet hides it, and that's where we attach our radios to. We have, I think, there's just 2 radios. They're pretty small. That's kind of how they work the antenna, and then this is where the antenna is, and it's hidden in a stealth chimney vent. But we do have the option to do like a brick-looking chimney to match the facade.
But the other, the shorter pieces of equipment, that won't be covered at all. There's no need to cover it.
No, and it wouldn't need to be covered because it's behind the parapet wall, so it's
Okay.
not visible.
I'm not sure what motion you're going to make, Ms. Rogers, but I would like the brick as a, okay.
As long as we can keep calling it stealth brick.
I like that very
I
much.
think we
yes.
have to say with stealth.
Yep. And I have samples too, so if you're interested, I can mail you some.
I think
That would be helpful for the
Right, and
zoning administrator and the BZA.
I think
Okay.
we're good. Okay.
Ready? I move that the Planning Commission recommend to the BZA that special use permit U-11572-15 for 1230 West Broad Street be approved with the following condition: that the rooftop antenna is screened using the stealth brick option to mitigate any potential visual impact in its surroundings, to its surroundings.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Motion moved and seconded. Miss, do we need a roll call?
Yes.
Yeah, go.
You can do a
go.
voice.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, item B, application for a special use permit antenna at 444 West Broad Street. Recommendation to the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Mr. Chairman, similar situation, different
Higher.
type of building. We have an applicant who is, if it's okay, we can go directly to them if you have questions. But this is on a different building, and we again want to see appropriate screening of the rooftop array.
If you could talk about the appropriate screening, I think that's where our questions are going to head.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, my name is Ed Donahue, representing Verizon Wireless. In a slightly different vein, this is a more traditional scenario, so it's a full 3-sectored array, a macro site, if you will, where the other is more of a small cell situation. So we do have 3 different sectors, larger roof, taller roof as well. But the question staff has raised, and I think it's a good one, is could we do something by way of screening? I don't think brick would be appropriate here, but I think we could do something appropriate to the penthouse. We're talking about affixing something to the penthouse, but a bit taller than the penthouse given the size of the roof and the coverage objectives. So I think we can work something up with staff that would be a good screening solution and probably make these panels disappear from the views from the street or anywhere else.
In beta sector proposed view.
Yep.
I think alpha is a better picture.
Well, so the beta sector proposed view, this is presumably without some sort of screening?
Yes.
And do you have any, can you give us some sort of sense of what proposed screening would be?
I think the idea would be it's probably an aggregate up there on the penthouse. The idea would be to take a screen wall up from the penthouse to screen each of the panels, but I don't have a visual simulation.
Mr. Chairman, we'd recommend that a material similar to the exterior materials used in the building be used now. That could be brick or a faux brick, or it could be a panel that resembles the precast or cast stone that's on the building.
Well, anticipating the question everybody's going to ask. Well, so is the BZA's approval based on them having a full and thorough understanding of what that screening material is?
I think their approval would be based on your recommendation, and certainly if you raise the question of appropriate screening, it would be incumbent on the applicant to have more detail regarding that you support it with the caveat that appropriate screening with certain materials be used. So I think they would pay a lot of attention to your recommendation. That's the purpose of this.
Who is and I think generally speaking this is fine. I think what our question is going to be is who is the determining factor in what appropriate screening means and doesn't mean. I think all of us have seen situations where these towers are screened and the screen looks worse than the tower would. So I think we're just curious who's going to make this decision.
Well, in terms of who might ultimately approve the sketch plan or whatever the detail plan is, it would be looked at by the zoning administrator for zoning compliance, and it certainly could be looked at by planning director for, whether or not it meets the intent of the commission.
The aesthetic appeal.
Yes. I think between those two groups, we work closely with the zoning administrator. He would look at height and dimensions, and certainly we look at materials, and so I think that'd be easily done.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
May I ask a question? Mr. Snyder, I'm going to ask a question about the actual location. One of the things that it says in the staff report is that the building is either approximately or has an average of 86 feet. One, I thought our buildings could only go to 85 feet. Two, is this penthouse thing that they're talking about actually, say, a penthouse apartment that's even higher than this 85 or 86 feet?
Penthouses would typically are things like elevator overrides and other kinds of mechanical equipment that will go above the roof line.
So there's nobody that lives in this little square
No.
thing? Okay. Now, the tower that's being proposed to put up there, we do have a view, alpha and gamma, I think it's next to the last one, and it looks like this little thingy right here, this little tower. So we've got and it's going to be attached to the outside of this penthouse?
That's how it appears. It would be on the, if you look on the existing view and then the proposed view, you see kind of 4 vertical elements, 2 going above the top of that line and 2 in the middle. So I'm assuming that all 4 of those are part of the package. And they would need, I think, to match the texture, color, material
Of the penthouse,
That can be done with lightweight materials, but
Well, I'd like
but
to
it should be
express my
stone or something that matches
I'd like to
that
express
material.
my concern that, one, this building is 86 feet on average. And 2, it has this penthouse. And it seems to me that if, in the future, we're going to expect this on every building, it should be taken into consideration so that the building itself, when it's finished, should be 85 feet, because that's what we approve. And that we shouldn't have to be approving penthouses or antennas. That's just a...
It's not incumbent on the
comment.
commission to recommend this.
No,
You think
I
it's-
know
if you
that.
don't,
I'm just saying, in the future, I think this is something that should be considered before we actually approve other buildings. But I have no problem with it as long as it has the appropriate screening, since it's already there.
I have a quick question. Like, on, I believe it's the final drawing of our packet, Exhibit B, page 404. This is enlarged partial building elevation beta sector. It appears that there are three circles on here, and in another picture, it appears they look somewhat like dishes. Is there what are these circles representing? Let's start there on this final drawing.
It's in the back.
It's the last page of our exhibit.
This is Arun Sudama, who's with Verizon Wireless, and he's got a blow-up of some of the plans that have already been submitted.
Hello. I believe the circles you're referring to are these here.
Correct.
Do I need to show them to the audience? Or-
You
No,
may.
No, they don't get to vote.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Would you turn on the microphone there beside you?
It's on.
It's on?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Should be bright green.
Now it is, okay.
Sorry.
The circles that you're referring to are microwave dishes.
Okay.
The reason that you see an antenna, the Verizon wireless antenna is protruding above the penthouse structure is to give distance between the microwave dish and the proposed Verizon antenna so that one doesn't interfere with the other.
So those are already there.
Yes, those microwave dishes have nothing to do with us.
Okay. So we have commented here that we want some appropriate screening. So the microwave dishes, which don't show up in the pictures, by the way, I didn't realize they were existing. When we are covering these antennas or screening these antennas, those dishes will remain. They're just totally unrelated to your proposal.
Right.
Correct.
And so the screening would go presumably behind these satellite dishes or microwave dishes and cover the antennas?
Correct.
So that's so why aren't they in these pictures? These pictures seem,
Because they're taken probably at that angle and not at a flat angle.
maybe they're behind these trees?
Or they're taken from the ground up angle.
It's really hard to see from the ground.
Yeah. Yeah, somebody's gonna.
Can you see the microwave dishes from the ground?
So have you seen these pictures?
I have, yes.
And,
The photo simulations,
yeah, well,
I have.
and do
and
these
I've-
take the microwave dishes out?
No.
They're basically, you can see them in the satellite.
It's just that you can't see them from the street level.
They're just showing what we can actually see from the street.
So, beta sector proposed view. This should have the microwave dishes, is this correct? I'm not disputing that the microwave dishes are there. I'm just trying to understand what the view will be.
You mean they're in there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're there, but we can't see them.
Yeah, I think what you see as existing view is exactly that. It's not a
Fine.
cleaned up
Okay.
view, right?
Okay.
So that the proposed view only adds in what we're proposing to add because there's,
If you were on top of the Virginia Heat, you could probably see those.
Well, no, it's fine. I didn't
yeah.
understand the answer to Russ's question, and I just wanted to make sure I got all that. Okay, fine.
Chair, may I?
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, why are we getting two separate presentations from
Just
two
a
parts
coincidence.
of Verizon? And second part of a question is also, then you're putting the antennas in these two places. Are you going to eventually propose putting antennas on other buildings in the city? And I just was wondering exactly why they're necessary. Maybe you could just quickly elaborate on it.
Sure. So to answer the first question, it's really just a coincidence. But Verizon Wireless is doing a good deal of the small cells, which was the first matter that you handled tonight. And the applicant, the representative of the applicant was exactly right. It's really a concentrated solution, particularly to a large group of population, and also to try to offload some of the traffic on the network. This is a more traditional site, a more macro solution, if you will. And Verizon and many of the carriers are doing the rooftops just as demand drives the network. T-Mobile, not so much. Sprint, they're coming. AT&T, Verizon, they're all deploying the network solutions, particularly on rooftops, where that solution can be met without new tower and new pole.
So you may indeed be back to
Yes, ma'am.
And another curious question would be, are you paying the buildings for this privilege?
Yes.
I don't know where I'm going with that, but, it's kind of interesting.
I don't either.
But, Lindy, maybe you were thinking that each company that came in would be putting another tower, and I'd be interested in knowing that too.
No, I was more interested in, that, and also, with two new buildings coming online, if you would be looking at that also. But it is interesting, I know we've had proposals for towers on the back of the net up at the baseball field, and we've had,
It has a tower.
and had proposals in other areas in the past 15 years that I know of. So I was just wondering, about the whole pattern going down Route 7.
So the carriers look at the new buildings in two ways. One is an opportunity for new customers and a new opportunity to install antenna, but also the potential to block signals, to look to see whether that new building is going to perhaps be something that they got to deal with, the network engineers have to deal with in terms of how the signal gets deployed. So it may be that the new buildings actually become an opportunity, but also a challenge to the RF engineers. So it could well be that you'll see more on those buildings. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
At one time, we wanted to put the broadband all the way down Route 7, and from over next to the Falls Church, Episcopal Church,
Sure.
and on up to the high school.
Yep.
Okay, without any other questions, motion?
The only question I would have is, we talked about materials, and
Yep.
I want to make sure we're on the same page, or that you can, in fact, deliver the kind of material we're talking about, something that would look substantial and match well the materials that are up there.
I'm sure we can.
What might that solution be, particularly in this case?
So it's got to be RF permeable. It's got to be an RF-friendly material that can allow the broadcasters to take them back and forth, but we can pretty well replicate what's up there. So I feel confident we can satisfy staff on that. We've done it. Georgetown, Old Town, Capitol Hill, if you like.
How about stealth brick?
We only want
Okay.
that on one building.
I will gladly make a motion. I recommend that the Planning Commission, that the Planning Commission recommend to the Board of Zoning Appeals that the special use permit U1575-15 for 444 West Broad Street be approved with the following condition: that the rooftop antennas are screened with materials that replicate the current building and are appropriate to mitigate any potential visual impact to its surroundings.
I'll second that.
Motion moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motion is unanimous.
I'm sorry, I missed who seconded that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, in terms of the approval process, assuming this goes through the BZA, the thought is that zoning administrator and planning director would both look at this in terms of the specific solution.
Would you be able to identify stealth brick, would you say?
Absolutely. I've done this before.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, item C, other business. I got an email from Cindy Mester on the theme, shorter meetings and less meetings are better than more meetings and long meetings. Here is the draft CIP schedule, starting on Tuesday, January 19th, and running through. I won't read it to you.
Oh, goody.
If anyone, it is in red and green, which I thought that was a lot of fun. If anyone has any feedback on this schedule,
What are the snowstorms?
you do. It's the new thing. Look, okay.
This was on my desk when I sat down.
Well, look through that because it's part of that.
3 times. I'll do
No,
4.
he seems to have the church one, I mean, the.
I got the one-way driving.
Not the-
All right.
Yeah, there we go, yeah, sure.
I got it now.
Yeah, and I have to warn you that a lot of times this
Yeah,
is flexible.
this is subject to change. So the big thing that I was waiting for everyone's feedback is this enough meetings on the CIP? Do you feel that we need more meetings? Or more work sessions of one sort or another? Because this is a tighter time frame, which, although we have never held to the tighter time frame, this is a proposed tighter time frame than we have had in the past.
My concern is on the work session side, where we have people from the departments come and present, and I just think that's a little tight for that, and for the ability for us to ask the questions we may need to ask. And, you know, we tried to tighten it up this year, and I think it was really hard. It was kind of hard to do, to get through all the different departments.
Right.
I mean, I'm willing to try, but I also thought it was a disservice to them that some of them had to sit there for hours.
Okay. Is there anything we know now that will be vexing that would require us longer so we don't end up with one of these work sessions at 12 o'clock or midnight, like the library?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the problem. The library's ongoing, facility issues are ongoing.
Right.
We don't know what the fire department's gonna ask for. That sometimes can be pretty long. Public Works has a lot of stuff that has to happen still. They still have a lot of sewer and
Well, no, so I
stormwater
sort of-
issues.
Last year, we didn't have a real long work session with Public Works because we agreed beforehand that we didn't need to look it over in a work session.
Well, and because that, Public Works, actually, I think we've agreed 2 years ago to their plan, and they're using the same plan. So,
I don't think we can know that we're gonna agree to that until we actually see what they submit. That's my problem.
well, yes.
Would it be possible to, if it is a work session, to start earlier so that you could, maybe we can provide sandwiches and things like that?
Might be an idea.
Keep it going on one evening, because there's a big, you know, it's convenient to start when we start, but that could help with what the problem Ms. Teets mentioned.
Yeah,
Well-
and maybe that would give us the flexibility, because part of the problem is we really don't know what we know until we actually start getting the
Well,
information.
okay, so, but I think the issue is that we don't know, but it's not that other people don't know. It's that we don't know. So I'm not asking the question, is there something we don't know that we should know? I'm asking the question, is there something that you know or that the staff knows that we should be apprised of?
Well, with
Like
the-
police radios.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any. It's the kind of thing we could certainly ask Ms. Mester, you know, are there any big items that we're unfamiliar with, if we could know about those ahead of time? The other thought being that if you were able, and I know it's imposition with people's work schedules and so forth, start earlier, then you might not have to have another meeting. And staff, you know, is around, so that's a easy transition from, you know, when the offices close and then the evening meetings begin. If we're in a room
All right.
like this, it could be easily, you know.
Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to email her back, say that this is fine as a draft schedule. That if there's something that she knows that's going to take longer, we're going to have to amend. How about that?
And we can also work to see if we can't figure out, and run it by you all, what's a reasonable draft organization of which departments need to talk to you or you need to talk to, and when those might be.
And Mr. Chair, I see
Within the
this is a
schedule.
good start, but, we're talking January and February here.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. What in the world could happen during those times?
Well-
We might need to shuffle or redo meetings.
We've never held to the schedule.
I know, so
Yeah.
why are we worried about it?
Because if someone sends you an email, you're supposed to respond.
This has always been,
But I would suggest,
always
if
expanded.
we'd certainly work with you if you wanted to do something early and have a working type of work session.
Okay, fine. Okay, got it. All right, the minutes. There are some revisions. I'm going to give you this packet, Miss G, from Madeline English, who is revising her comments appropriately. So on page 3, as written, page 2 is as amended, and then page 1 is an outline of her notes. So any motion to approve that is with those revisions?
I understand that sometimes when you're speaking from notes, that you think you've said something that you haven't, and or vice versa. Somebody puts something in there that wasn't said. But I don't know how different this is from what was in the minutes. I mean, it seems to me.
The only thing that's in that statement is my name and address. I don't know who or what anyone. I didn't mention Mason Row. I didn't mention cementing over West End. Absolutely nothing did I say there. There's a bunch of maybe ands, buts.
Oh, we got it.
But I'm hesitant to have somebody.
No, I'm amending it. I read what she wrote. It was closer to what she said.
My name is Madeline English. I live at 315 Grove Avenue. I attended the last meeting. I had a rough draft that I read. And I assumed that what I said would be placed in the meetings, in the minutes. And I said nothing here about, where is it? I said nothing about Mason Row, about its size adjacent to the single-family residence. I said nothing about West End Park. I did say existing stormwater, and that was a ditch. You can look at that, and I will read.
No, it's okay. It's okay, because we have your written transcript, which I think, and we'll just add that to the minutes. So that's fine.
So I said nothing about
Yes,
the
we've got it, Ms. English.
WOD trail.
We've got it. We have your excellently written out statement, so we're going to add that to our minutes and make that change. Are there any other changes? Amendments, additions? Anyone? Motion to approve the minutes with those changes?
So moved.
Minutes moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. Minutes are approved. Planning Commission reports.
I did go to the groundbreaking for the Kensington, and it was, It's lucky that it wasn't rainy, because it could have been knee-deep in mud. But it was very, very nice, and then, and so everybody was pretty excited to get it going, that's all.
Very good. Anyone else? Anyone else? Planning Director's Report. Oh, do we have other business?
You said you had
The other business was the schedule.
Okay.
Planning Director's Report. Thank you, though.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, first thing I'd like to do is to announce with pleasure that we have a new planning staff on our staff, Ms. Carly Aubrey, who is here with us tonight. Brandon Wade left the city and is going to be relocating, he and his family, and moving staff around. Keita Ruzzi is going to be, in addition to doing planning work, serving as Deputy Zoning Administrator. And we have added Ms. Aubrey, who has 15 years' experience and comes to us from Stuart, Florida, also has worked in California and Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, has a lot of really good experience, and particularly in the environmental area. She's AICP certified, so we feel very fortunate to have her on board, and we're looking forward to her working here in the city. She and her family live in Springfield, and she has a first grader. So just wanted to introduce you. You're going to see more of her. She attended the work session with City Council on Mason Row, and she's going to be working with us staff, including Mr. Fuller. So again, just wanted to introduce you.
Oh, thank you.
Also, we have a copy of our monthly report that's, I think, been provided to you by email. I think, Ms. G, did we? Yeah.
I got it.
So it has, we're going to be sending that by email, so if you have questions on that. Some of the highlights, we were at the groundbreaking of the Kensington. I agree with Commissioner that it was a good event, well attended. It was interesting that Mr. Novak, who worked on that project, said that there had been earlier interest some 14 years ago when the city manager, Dan McKeever, was here in the city to try to bring an assisted living project to the city. And so I think Commission did a lot of really good work on that project. If you see the architectural renderings that have been done, greatly improved, I think, from where it started. I think the Commission had a lot to do with that. I think it'll be a very handsome addition to the city and provide needed housing for a segment of the population that needs more of that type of housing. So it's a very good thing. We also we will be meetings this Thursday at the EDC on a couple of projects. And I think some of you may have gotten notice on that.
No.
We will, my understanding is there will be a meeting this Thursday. I won't get that to you. One of the projects is at Broad and Little Falls, the Stratford Motor Launch.
And we've moved to the night?
I believe it's in the evening, yes.
Yeah.
And what time is that meeting?
And the second project is at the southeast corner of Spring and Broad,
Right.
a small mixed-use project.
But what time is that meeting?
I believe it's at 7:30, and I believe it'll be here in the Dogwood room.
Okay.
Check.
Thank you.
Okay.
So-
Just very quickly on Spring Street, are we all have received something about the making one-way or two-way, changing Spring Street from one-way to two-way.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize we had a timetable on this. I thought this was more of a general idea.
Well, in the small area plan, there was discussion about going two-way, and also what kinds of traffic calming and mitigation could be made, because right now you have a fair amount of fast traffic going through there, even though it's a school area, because there's not a lot of activity on it if it's one way. We had some meetings in the field with the church representatives and a number of staff to talk about various options, one of which included a raised crosswalk between the school and the church to provide a clear path for students to go from one side to the other. Of course, also signing and other kinds of techniques can be used to slow traffic and let people, make sure that people are aware of the activities that are going on in that area. So that's a work in progress. The city manager has been working on that himself with support from Public Works and also the planning staff.
Okay.
I would mention also traffic calming. Those of you who follow CACT, we do believe we're going to be able to start construction soon on the Parker Kent traffic calming project. Presently, there are painted outlines of what that will be. Jeff Sykes has been working along with Paul Stoddard and the Public Works staff to get that going. So we expect that will get done this fall, and also we're working on Pennsylvania Avenue, another project there. So we're pleased that our additional staffing is giving us some traction. We're going to be delivering some traffic calming projects this fall.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'm kind of concerned about the situation with Spring Street, because that was made mention of in the West Broad plan. However, it was just part of an overall idea. And I don't think anything has come to, we don't have any information on it. And if it comes to us, we may not approve it.
Correct.
So I just would like, to have the information loud and clear that this is nothing that we have on the agenda. And I've spoken to Ms. Patera about it, because they were quite concerned about a lot of the people who live on Park Avenue, and also they're also members of the St. James.
It would take a formal action to do that. Again, the small area plan tries to identify issues that may need to be looked at. That's one of them. So there's no official change pending. It would have to be an advertised process and hearings and so forth. So it's a long way from being something that would happen for certain.
We haven't voted on
exactly. The
West
small area
Broad.
plan is still under review as well.
Right, and I'm not too sure I'm even for that, in this
Well, it's something we
situation.
could take out if we didn't want it.
Right, and I
That's
think
also
it's
something that
something.
would be further studied as well, with more in-depth look. So, good point, though.
Motion to adjourn.
May I ask one other point, Chair?
So moved.
We do have,
Don't move.
I have two other items I wanted to mention.
Hold on. Go ahead.
We have some important work that you've seen earlier, and that's work on the parking ordinance and also on changes to the B zones. We had a work session with City Council on both those items, and they have referred them back to you for further work before they come back to Council for a first reading. So Susan Bell has been working on those with us, and we will be scheduling some time to have a work session with the Commission to get further feedback before refining those ideas and sending them back to Council for a possible first reading. These are issues that ZOAC has identified in the past and the Planning Commission has mentioned. So again, looking at parking ratios and also tweaks to the B zones of the zoning ordinance. So stay tuned for a work session to talk about those in detail.
Having served on the ZOAC committee for several years, I would, if we are going to consider it in a work session, I would like to see the part of the ZOAC report to council that mentions that we wanted to have changes there as part of the presentation.
Certainly.
Because I don't, it's a long time ago and I don't remember.
We certainly can provide that, and we did some responses. And then also the Commission has mentioned over time interest in making some changes to some of these zoning categories. And we had earlier work sessions with you, I believe, on the parking standards. So we'll have a chance to talk about it in detail, and it will take some, they're meaty topics, so they'll take some time. But I think you saw some of the early presentation before they got to council, along with CACT and EDA and others.
Okay, is that it?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
motion to adjourn and a second.
I move to adjourn.
We already did it.
Oh.
Technically. Okay.
Russ did,
All those in
or
favor
somebody did.
signify by saying
Aye.
Aye.
we're adjourned. Now, We have the work session. Item 1, Inns of Virginia, 419 and 421 West Broad.
Came as a surprise.
Could I take a little break while they're?
Yes, ma'am.
Maybe I'll wait until the.
No, go ahead.
No, I'll wait.
Sit here.
Can we sit here?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
I'm going to pass around a sheet of paper, and if you're attending this work session, even though you might be waiting for the second work session, please print your name and your address. Thank you.
Now, I'm happy to keep the microphones on, Mr. Snyder.
Yes, sir.
So, why are we filming again the work sessions?
I don't know. I haven't really requested them to be filmed. Have you requested them?
No, but when we were chastised because we thought it was a work session, so everyone turned off their mics, not feeling that we had some secret, undemocratic EDC-like meeting, but we just did. So I'm just curious when the change happened.
I think that there were specific requests in the past to film it because some people couldn't.
Expand on that.
You want me to name names?
Yeah. Well, was specific requests, was there a flood of requests or one person?
Probably a handful of requests, most frequently on the Mason Rush request.
What's the downside of recording?
All right. It's somewhat of a hassle, but it's okay. And I think when you like move down in the big room, it just takes the proverbial wind out of our sails, and it's no longer really a work session in the traditional.
I mean, the good news is we now have capability to film in both places, so we can, if need be.
The beauty in the old days was we would unroll the plan and we would
Lean over it.
and we weren't on mics and yeah.
Sounds lovely.
It was great fun. I don't remember doing it. He never made, he never did everything.
I've got all the
Okay. I was delaying a little so you could take a break.
Oh, I said I'll do it in between these things.
You're not
I just
taking a
have to
break,
move.
though.
Not right now.
All right. Take it away whenever you're ready.
Okay. Terrific. Well, I guess I'll do a quick intro, and I'll try to make it quick because I know Antoinette, my engineer, and Ben, she's not feeling too well tonight, so we'll try to make it quick.
It's okay, we're not needing her.
Okay. Well, I'll just give a quick introduction to what we're trying to do, and then I think Antoinette can take over, and I'll answer any questions. Basically, my name is Tim Lewis, and I'm the managing member of Woodbridge Hotel LLC, which is a small family-owned and operated business. It's basically my family, my mother and my siblings, brother and sister. We currently own now the Flower Shop and the existing Inns of Virginia Hotel. We developed it, my father built it back in 1969. And we're looking to redevelop it into a Holiday Inn Express and Suites. We are currently negotiating with IHG, the parent company, and we have a franchise agreement here. We've done a feasibility study showing the Holiday Inn Express really works on the site. We're very excited about the potential. It's a 78-unit hotel. It's about 46,500 square feet. And the issue really for us, the two main issues are a parking reduction and some waivers on the setbacks. So those are the two issues on the engineering front. So basically, I think everyone's familiar. The hotel has been there since '69, and the Falls Church Florist is adjacent to it. It's an infill site. It's small and difficult. Underground parking or parking structure decks is really not feasible. So it's all surface parking. So I believe we have 59 spaces for 78 units. Now we've been doing our own parking study, and as you'll know, I think everyone has a copy. We have been tracking it for months through this high season, and the ratio is about 16 cars per 27 rooms rented per night. It's like a 57%. We've also monitored, we bought a device to monitor traffic in and out into West Broad Street. So, basically, other than that, I guess that's sort of the intro.
Well, so let me just, in the interest of brevity, soul of wit, we'll have you out of here in no time at all. So you're buying the florist building, or you've already owned it?
We own it.
Okay, fine. You're taking it down.
Yes, and the hotel adjacent.
Yeah.
Demo.
Okay. The whole thing's down.
Yeah.
Is the current setback going to change from Broad Street? Or
No,
the building
not from
face
Broad
will be, you're replacing the Broad Street, so in other words, the current setback will just be the same?
Yes.
Is this correct? Do I have this
So I
right?
can take you through the site. I was gonna.
Okay,
can
well, see,
go
I was
into
going to
that
ask like
next.
4 okay, go ahead, but
You
see,
want-
mine would be
okay.
quicker, but you go ahead.
Okay. So. Do I need to have a microphone?
Yeah. You can just grab this.
You're right.
It's harder.
Sorry, we wanted to go old school with the boards today. I didn't know you would need the
No, it's okay.
microphone. So I'll just take you around the site to go over what we're proposing and then the setbacks, the variances and waivers that we're requesting with the application. So we are doing the 20-foot setback from West Broad Street for the proposed building. Both of the existing buildings are coming down, and we're going to provide the 10-foot clear brick sidewalk, standard West Broad streetscape with the planter islands that have the raised curbs on them, and just the standard streetscape. We are proposing some bike racks out in the front here. And then, so everything, we're not asking for any variances out on Broad Street. And then heading into the site, we're proposing 59 parking spaces. So there's going to be a floor of the main lobby area, and then there's going to be this shaded area, which is the building of the rooms above. So it'll be 4 stories total. And so what we ran into with the narrow site, it's about 104 feet of frontage on West Broad Street, is that in order to provide the parking bays to have the 18-foot length stalls, the 23 and 24-foot drive aisles, and then 2 additional parking rows here, is that we didn't have the room to provide the landscaping required. And also it's adjacent to the Lee Square Apartments, which is zoned RM. And because it's a residential zone and we're B1, the buffer and the setbacks required along that RM site is twice as great as your standard 10-foot setback. So we are required 20-foot buffer and 20-foot setbacks along here. So the variances that we're requesting is a 10-foot setback provided adjacent to the RM district where the existing building is today, but for a shorter length. So today the existing building does go all the way back here adjacent to the RM lot. And today, and then in the proposed conditions, we are pulling it back further into the site, but for the front portion, we are asking for a 10-foot setback there. And then you also can't have proposed parking within your setback requirements. And so because we have this drive aisle and parking back here, we're holding a 10-foot setback from this area in the back and that RM district, but we are having a drive aisle with a proposed 6-foot fence along this side. And today there's parking all the way to the rear of the site and also adjacent to the property line. So those are existing conditions. And then adjacent to the street, we are asking for a reduction in buffer, and that's to help provide room for the bike racks to have them out on the streetscape and make sure they stay clear of the 10-foot clearance, sidewalk clearance. And that's for this surface parking. There is building above it that meets the 20-foot setback, but there is surface parking adjacent to the street. And then also for a waiver for the perimeter parking lot landscaping along this eastern property line here. And that is, again, we are unable to provide the 10-foot setback just the way the site is oriented, and in order to fit, the parking, to maximize the amount of parking spaces on the site. So I think that summarizes. For stormwater management, we are going to meet the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance requirements. And one of the factors for that actually is that we're having to build 300 feet of storm out in West Broad, since there are no existing storm sewer connections today. But that's certainly going to help the existing sheet runoff that goes from the site to the rear properties. We're going to be capturing the site, treating it, and piping it out to West Broad Street to tie into the storm sewer connection, as well as providing some permeable pavers for the stormwater management. We did try to do infiltration testing, but it didn't work on the site, so we're having to do the 300 feet of storm.
Great. Any questions?
Since it's a tear down, do our new setbacks, are they required with a tear down and a new building, or can they go with the 10-foot setback?
They'd have to get a variance. They are setting back, I believe, at least the 20 feet now required from Broad Street.
Oh, it's 20 feet,
The building's
okay.
presently, I think, back quite a bit anyway.
20 feet, okay.
20 feet is the
Okay,
minimum.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But we are meeting the setbacks on West Broad.
Right.
Okay.
So we would expect the full streetscape there and the additional setback that the council and planning commission approved in terms of change to the zoning ordinance.
Which is raised tree pits.
I was gonna say, if that ever changed, you guys, like if the streetscape changed before you guys built it, you wouldn't have any trouble just going with whatever it ends up with, right?
But there's a tree.
I don't want to get into it, but
The parking issue, I think, is one that I think would be helpful for the applicant to explain. They have what I would call kind of an activity record, but it's not what we typically would get in terms of more of a full-blown parking study, and so when we're seeing reductions in parking, we're typically getting things that offset less parking than is required, including transportation demand management techniques. This is really an accounting, as I understand it, of what you've experienced. So I think some more discussion of that.
yeah, I probably missed
This
this.
is very
but
bare bones.
the current building has 76 units or something.
No, the existing hotel now is 32.
32 units, and you're
we
gonna.
only have, I think, 22 spaces.
All right.
We've had that since 1969.
All right, and this thing would have 76 rooms.
78.
78.
With 59 spaces.
59
Correct.
spaces. All right. And would it have? Is it gonna have any sort of other use, like
We'll have shuttle.
cafe
Well,
or
no, there is
no
no
meeting spaces? Or anything? Just
Well, there is part of their prototypical
Some small meeting space, yeah.
Holiday Inn Express. There's a conference. Breakfast is included,
Mhm.
but it's not considered separate. We won't have a separate.
So you don't
mixed
expect
use.
like people showing up for something other than
No,
staying the night?
no.
at the hotel, yeah.
You mentioned shuttle. We'd heard some of that in early discussions, but it's not been put down on paper in terms of what the commitment is. Is that firm? What's the nature of that commitment, and what would it consist of?
The shuttle? Well, we would provide that full service, full shuttle,
To where?
wherever anybody needed it. I mean, to the metro, to, we would provide, again, just some sort of public assistance in getting guests where they would need to go.
This is where
Well,
I think
I'm asking because I can't imagine if a guest comes to you and says, I want to go downtown, but I don't want to take the metro. You're not going to send them on your shuttle.
Well, I think what our analysis is saying is that people come other than by car. I mean, we don't have a 1-to-1 ratio. We have a 57% ratio of, cars to to room nights rented. So, you know, whatever we can provide in addition to that, I think we would be able to offset any issues that might occur with the reduction. So, and with the, and this is only the reason we haven't. I mean, we did get a quote for a full-blown parking study for like $27,000, and again, we're trying to make this project as feasible as possible. We wanted to, and we've had a hotel, and we've there for a long time. We have other hotels in the area and some office buildings, and we feel confident that the parking reduction won't be an issue for us in operating.
Well, okay. You're the operator. I think you have been the operator long enough. You probably know theoretically what's going on
Sure.
here. I think where we would go with this is saying you'll have a shuttle. Well, are you going to take someone to Middleburg? I mean, what is, like, no. So we just need a little more detail.
Right.
I think what would be more helpful, generally speaking, for us is to keep it simple. What are you going to do when you overflow your lot?
Right.
Will you have some agreement with the church? Will, you know, something?
Right. Well, we haven't approached our neighbor, Mr. Beach. I mean, our at night is when most, obviously, everyone will be parked there, and so the daytime there's, you know, we won't have an issue.
Well,
so,
I don't know that we need to get into the detail
Right.
at this meeting, but I think that as we go through this process, you're going to have to say, hey, in 30 years we've overflowed twice. We gave Beach
right.
something, and he let us park 5 cars.
Right. And Mr. Chair, just in terms of parking, the parking ordinance amendments we're working on envision the Planning Commission being able to provide relief or some variation in the parking through a special exception process. And it would be subject to a transportation demand management plan. So we're not there yet, but the thought being that if there's a reason to have less parking, it needs to be looked at carefully to make sure that other measures are going to make sure that it works, and that appropriate conditions would be in place to make sure that promises made are promises kept. And there are a wide variety of things. Now, bike racks certainly help, proximity to the metro helps, a shuttle would help, but detailing out those would be very helpful. The Kensington, which just broke ground, had a pretty sophisticated demand management program. It's nearby. You also have the Hilton Garden Inn, which has a shuttle, may have a second one coming. So I think these things can be done, but being able to tie them down, I think, is very important. So I think, the applicant, we'd suggest the applicant continue to refine this, work with our staff to detail these out so that we can make sure that it could, in fact, work. And again, the ordinance amendments that are being looked at, that we're talking about with the council, would be putting that in the hands of the Planning Commission to make changes with those kinds of provisos.
You articulated it better than I. I know that there are a couple questions more down here.
Just what is the process? What are you looking for from tonight, and what's going forth? I mean, I feel like
We meet on Monday, October 5th.
I know.
Yes.
So that will be considered then?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the process, what's going to be before you is a recommendation to the BZA on the variances first.
Oh, okay.
So they have a conceptual site plan that they've submitted, but there's no site plan submission for you at this point.
Yeah.
And so the waivers would be dealt with later, and, they're not asking, for shared parking because there's no sharing later on with you, so they're going straight to the BZA with a recommendation from you next month.
I just feel like this is a little bit different process than what we've done before.
So if someone asks for, all right, we'll come back to that.
And if I may, one of the reasons we're also here, so this one's different than the other mixed-use projects that we're asking for a variance for the parking reduction versus a waiver for a parking reduction. Since this is not a mixed-use project, It's simply not being able to provide the amount of parking spaces required by code. So the parking reduction is going to have to be approved by the BZA as part of our variance application. Sorry.
Just push the button, slide it over. Sorry.
So we are requesting, one of the variances is to not provide the amount per code that's required. And the reason that we also asked to go before you before the BZA recommendation is that we wanted to make sure that this was something that was acceptable to the Planning Commission before we get to the full site plan process, because we did look at alternative options for the site, and there wasn't much that we could do, and it wasn't really economically feasible to try to do an underground structure or even an above ground structure, and that's why the way that the site is laid out today is kind of where we are, and so if it's something that's completely infeasible, then it's something we wanted to know up front for development of the site. So.
Also, the building is within the height limits of the zone, so there's not a special exception request for additional height, which also would be something that you would review. I believe it's within the 55 feet of the zone
So it
ordinance.
could be almost by right, except for the
Correct.
for the variances.
And a site plan, of course.
And the waivers.
And the waivers, okay.
Yeah, I will have a couple questions. First, I want to understand the flow of the cars. I understand from the plans and from the pictures that they're coming sort of through the middle of the building, and then there are the parking spaces are on the left and the right. But I was a little unsure about the 6 feet or 10 feet you're talking about on the farthest. I guess it's the west end of the west end side, the opposite from the entrance. You're flowing through, right. They're going up through there. I follow that, and then you're wrapping around to get to those additional spots on the opposite side. Is that the theory? And how wide is that area?
23 feet. So there are this drive aisle is 24 feet, and this one's 23 feet. There is a 20-foot drive aisle here. There's a 20-foot drive aisle just in this section that's going to be one way coming in here. So you could come in and go this way, but people coming this way would not be able to exit.
Okay. And in the actual space itself, is there, I see a food prep area. Is there something more substantial than like a prep area? I mean, hotels typically have something larger scale than just, is it just organizing the food from something that's being outsourced, or how's the food operation working?
Well,
from a facility standpoint, I don't really care about the actual food.
I think it's my understanding, it's the drawings you have are through the third revision process with IHD, and what we've provided is what they require. So I think it's fairly minimal on the food prep. What you see is pretty much their prototype.
So the space is not supporting a restaurant kind of.
No, it's
setup.
I'm sorry. No,
Yeah.
it's just breakfast and limited, minimal.
Okay. And then when I look at the layout and the pictures, on both the west and the east side, on the parts that are closest to West Broad Street, there are very few windows. Yet it appears that those units, that up and down, that those elevations, those are units that could potentially have windows. What was the theory with the very limited windows on both the east and west side?
Well, you've got the corridor and this office side. Really, there's nothing other than the exit stair, and if you notice, there was just
Right here.
Yeah, here.
Oh,
right,
there. Okay.
right.
Yeah, this is the portion closest to West Broad Street on either side. Right, like you said, I think it's where the staircase is.
Right,
But there's
right.
no
And
windows.
it's just because the access of the hall runs along that corridor, so, and the rooms go on the front part to the front, so obviously.
No, here's where I'm talking
There,
about.
right.
And I'm clear what. So when I look at the drawings, it looks like those are suites. There's
Right.
there's a
Right.
hallway, and then there's corner suites, 17 by 9 and 17 by 27 suite.
Right.
In terms of visually, the part that's hidden has plenty of windows. The part that's visible from West Broad Street, both on the east side, coming eastbound and westbound, has a visual appeal that I think I'm less than pleased with. And this is just a work session, so
Right.
this is at these, at these meetings we sort of express
Sure.
our general thoughts on it.
Sure.
And in terms of the design, I mean, it's certainly an improvement over what's there now, but I was confused about the lack of windows on those
Right.
two,
Well, yeah, it is.
two
It's a
facades.
It's a huge improvement, and we do have. We've been conditionally. The design has been conditionally approved by IHG, as well.
Yeah, so it's the location you see where it has the sign, essentially. What she's got her hands on right here.
Right.
Those are the ones I'm confused about. Why no windows? That's all, or limited
Right.
windows.
Right. Right.
But other
Well,
than
most hotel rooms only have one window.
well, the one that is the westbound side, it's right next to a location that has a lot of enormous setback. Actually, I don't know the distance, but it's a lot of green space, and so that facade is going to be highly visible when you're heading eastbound. No, the other one actually.
Right.
Yeah. So if you're heading eastbound on West Broad Street, you're going to be looking at the part that has no windows. So the rest of it's relatively attractive. I just thought that was a blank face for that side, and especially considering that the Broadmont is set back so far.
Right. Right.
So that's just my own view of the design. As I said, otherwise it's a large improvement.
Right.
All right, at this point, I'm really pleased with the 20-foot setback. That was always my biggest thing, and big fan of the bike racks, which
Right.
soft spot in my heart. That's it.
Right.
Okay. I have a couple of questions. Gary or Jim, maybe you can answer these. How many variances are we looking at? Just the one for parking?
Yes.
Fine.
Setbacks as well.
I think is there one setback or
Two.
two? That's a variance.
It's for the setback of the building as well as parking within the setback.
Oh,
Right.
but not the front setback, just the
Not the
sides.
front
Okay.
setback, just the sides along
Okay.
the RM zone.
And how many waivers?
Depending on how you break it up, we have a waiver for the commercial entrance within 100 feet of the residential zone.
Yeah, we always give that, don't worry about it.
We have an interior parking lot landscaping waiver. We are providing 2.6% versus the 5. And then
2.6 versus 5?
Yes. And then we are requesting a waiver for the perimeter parking lot landscaping along the, both along the residential property, along the non-residential property, and on West Broad Street. So technically, we're supposed to have a buffer adjacent to the street because of this little parking space that's adjacent to the street.
Can't count the streetscape, basically, is what you're saying.
So the streetscape is still going to be there?
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
But the code talks about an additional 10 to screen that end
I
space.
see, okay. My problem is with the perimeter parking landscape waiver. I'm very pleased that it's a 20-foot setback and that you're going to have bikes for us. But I do think that particularly on the side of the parking lot, Lee Square, that there should be some kind of buffer. And I'm not willing to do a waiver on that. I mean, I think there's got to be something. If you've got 20-some feet, that's almost as large as a street. I mean, and it's just a parking lane. It's just a
Is there any
driving
buffer
lane.
there now?
So, I'm not saying you have to put 10 feet of buffer in there, but you have to put something. You have to put some landscaping, where it's an awful lot of concrete for no landscaping.
So, we are providing the minimum requirement of the drive aisle width in that area for two-way drive aisle, which is how we came up with the 23 feet. That's per the zoning ordinance as well. And
is there any way you could do it one way?
we would lose
Have it
spots to
come in.
provide some turnaround area. So we would then require a greater parking reduction to lose some spaces.
I don't have a problem with the reduction, particularly since we're giving away so many other reductions in much larger projects. But I do have a problem with giving up practically all of our buffers.
The buffer in the back, this is an improvement. Currently, on both sites, there is no buffer on both.
Well, I know that,
both
but
of those.
one of the things about having a new development is that you do get some improvement on the site, and I don't see that drive aisle being any improvement at all.
But the back is an improvement.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's an
This is my
intersection between these two comments on the face wall and the lack of buffer. That would be my, so I think it's the same. I don't think it's, I think this is problematic both from a design and buffer standpoint. I think that's what we're saying. So is there a way to soften it, for lack of a better word?
Mr. Chair, one of the techniques used in other communities when you have a commercial use directly adjacent to a residential is to have improved screening materials. Many cases you'll find a brick wall or brick piers and much more substantial fencing. Presently, there's an older fence, I'm not sure who owns it, around the perimeter of the property. Can you tell us who owns that and what its age and what the prospects would be for doing an improved screening material around the perimeter of the property?
Well, that fence, we were planning on improving that fence and that buffer between us and Lee Garden Apartments. We haven't determined what yet, but we would make an improvement on that buffer.
So that is your fence to change, or
Yes.
to make changes to? So,
So are these trees that are up against the fence, are they gonna be taken down for the parking?
I believe they're on the Lee Garden side of the,
Another technique used when you don't have enough landscaped area on your own site is to provide landscaping on an adjacent site. And so, for example, if you had a screening wall around the property instead of a stockade fence, and you had additional landscaping that could be negotiated around the perimeter of that, you get a very durable, attractive, and sound reduction out of a brick wall and landscaping, evergreen screening, which is, I know of many examples of that nearby. I can't think of ones necessarily here in Falls Church, but I can show them in Arlington and other places.
It also could be that the apartments don't want, they want a fence. A lot of them do. They might not want landscaping, to go on their property, thinking that people who escape from the hotel could run across their property, or whatever happens, that people worry about hotels. But
Certainly be nice to have the option.
Yeah, I think that's something we should look into, because I do have a problem with no landscaping at all.
I just have one quick question. Did you guys ever look into the possibility of consolidating with 417 next door, doing a little bigger project?
we did. We had a meeting very early on, but just thought the scope of the project was too big and not really feasible for us. And I don't believe Mr. Beach was interested at that point in selling. So we didn't pursue it.
One thing about it, if you could get an overflow parking agreement with Mr. Beach, then taking out a few spots to allow for better landscaping wouldn't be as big of an issue. You know, so, I mean, if you have the shuttle and you have maybe a 10-mile perimeter or 7-mile, whatever your perimeter, you know, is, and you have an overflow parking agreement, then 2 or 3 more spots off to get better landscaping wouldn't be a bad thing.
Why do you think you'll lose spaces by making that one way? That seemed like a reasonable suggestion.
Actually, if you, so the minimum drive aisle width, I believe, for any 90-degree parking is 23 feet. So even if it was one way, we would have to make them diagonal spaces in order to reduce the actual width of the drive aisle to 16 feet.
I see. Okay.
So it's something that you can talk about with staff.
Okay, I think that's got it. So greater specificity on the let's call it the transportation issues, and the shuttle. It sounds like a design and a landscaping issue, but I really think they're smashed into one, and that's got to be better. I had some questions, and I have to go there because I'm not smart enough to sit here and figure this out. But it seems to me if you make it one way, you make the ingress and egress worse. So really, it's just a question of softening that wall. But I don't know. I have to go there. I don't know. Okay. Yes, Mr. Fuller.
I didn't have the opportunity to meet with you earlier. I think some of the other staff did, and Akita on our staff is handling this case. But I had a few questions.
Sure.
One was, I know the study you did was based on the existing hotel and its occupancy rate and parking demand. Do you think you might be able to get data for the Holiday Inn Express? Because that's all, you're tearing down the existing.
Sure.
You're probably going to have a higher demand.
Sure.
A newer facility,
Sure.
something like that, and they probably have that kind of information.
Sure, I can
for their
provide that,
units.
absolutely.
So I think that would be more useful than the data you provided us. I mean, it gives us a picture of
Sure.
your current demand, but I think the new product will have a higher demand.
Right.
And I think, you sort of need that as part of your justification
Sure.
for the parking. Because you're asking for variances on the parking and you're asking for variances on the setbacks. The state code did change on July 1 in terms of variances. The hardship was struck, and it basically says unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. So basically, it's saying a variance means the application of a zoning ordinance or reasonable deviation from those provisions regulating the shape, size, or area of a lot or land, or the size, height, area, bulk, or location of the building structure, when the strict application of the ordinance would unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property. So that's your threshold that you need to justify to the BZA. And this is what they're going to look at and the Planning Commission needs to make a recommendation on that, and staff needs to weigh in on that and make a recommendation on that. So you need to carefully look at that language and understand it and provide written justifications to bolster your application now to address this, because that's the threshold you have to meet. It's a higher threshold than the waivers that we deal with at site plan, which these are happening before we deal with site plan. So
Okay.
just, it'll help you with your application as you're going forward to get those materials in
Okay.
to help Akita, with this case. So
Okay.
those were just sort of some observations I had.
Thank
just
you.
looking at this. So, yep. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you got it from us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I know it's going to be an improvement on Broad Street.
It's very exciting.
And at a new facility, you are going to get a lot more people.
Yeah, well, we're excited about it. We think it'll be good for Falls Church. The
Yeah.
revenue will be 3 times, so should be good for the city.
Yeah.
Before we move to the next item, has everyone in the audience signed the sheet so that we're printed your name so that we know that we're in it?
It never came by, I didn't see it at all.
I have. Do we know where the sheet is?
Oh my, find the sheet. Okay. Okay, last but not least, newest Mason Row redevelopment submission. And while we're making the, we're changing the sets here, so to speak. So before, so I would, what's the story on your presentation? Do you have a long presentation? Long as in more than 6 minutes?
I'd say it's probably 15 minutes.
And we saw it last week, right?
Okay. Let's, how much can, okay, what in that 15-minute proposal is absolutely critical?
There's some additional information in there that's probably 5 minutes worth of information, 10 minutes.
Okay. Well, all right. So maybe we'll do, okay. Well, I think we have, this is what I'm thinking. I think we have tons of questions. I think we generally can anticipate what the audience questions are. I think if you do the presentation, we'll, all right, but it's fine. We'll be here till the last dog dies. Okay, fine. Go ahead, do the presentation. You know, we've seen this presentation. I think that with a show of hands, is there anyone who has not seen this presentation in whole or in part? See, we've all seen it. So it's okay, but you got to do what you got to do. It's okay.
We just go to Q&A. Yeah, just put the images up and go through the images. We moved the hotel to the main intersection of West Street and West Broad Street, which is there in the left-hand corner. We separated the hotel building completely from the apartment building, and we created a pedestrian street, which is facing West Street, just off of Grove. And it connects West Street now with Market Square. And that street is about 30 to 32 feet wide, so it's now enabling us to create retail space there and room for outdoor seating on that pedestrian street. We removed the loading zone that was on Northwest Street facing the W&OD trail. We have consolidated a majority of the loading and the trash to your right there, just off of the eastern access point to the project. We've removed the retail that was previously on Park Avenue, and we have added a left turn lane on West Broad Street into the eastern access point there where you see the traffic signal. Let's go to the next slide. This is the upper floors, just showing again in purple the hotel building where it is today, no longer in the rear of the project, but out there on the main corner, separated from the apartment building. We moved the parking garage further back into the project from Park Avenue. We lowered the heights of the building considerably on Park Avenue. We increased the building setbacks along Park Avenue as well. And we reduced the building facades along Northwest Street facing the W&OD trail. This is just the renderings that you've seen showing the Market Square and Mason Avenue in the foreground front area there. Retail on both sides of Market Square and on both sides of Mason Avenue. Next. This is where the hotel is now on West Street and West Broad Street. Next. This is Park Avenue with a townhouse style apartment that is 3 stories, and then the building step back is about 30 feet, and the beginning of the garage starts. And we put a window residential building frontage on the garage as it faces Park Avenue. This is the intersection of Park Avenue and Northwest Street, and this shows what we've agreed to with the Park Authority to bring the W&OD trail down to the intersection so that bikers and runners and pedestrians can cross at the intersection, signalizing this intersection, and we're also adding the crosswalks you see there. In front of you is Mason Avenue with retail on both sides and retail going down West Street, apartments above. This is just a view of Mason Avenue as you're turning into Mason Avenue off of West Broad Street with retail on both sides. The hotel and the hotel lobby is there at the entrance to your left. This is just, again, the road improvements. What's changed is that we've reached an agreement with the Park Authority to bring the trail crossing and the trail itself down to the intersection, as it's shown there now. The top gray line and the kind of top crossing there over Northwest Street, and we're adding turn lanes to that street. Next, we've talked to the Park Authority, and we're talking to the city staff about making the trail crossing perpendicular at Grove Avenue and doing a raised crossing. This is the intersection of West Street and West Broad Street. We have a small trash pickup area there across from the Wells Fargo Bank, and it would be for trash only, and it is a garage door enclosed trash area that would be have limited hours of collection. And we have, in working with the city, Public Works, and from our discussions with CACT, we made the decision to add a left turn lane into the project on West Broad Street, and you can see it there. It's marked 110-foot queuing left turn lane, and we've provided some property to provide the room to add that left turn lane. Transportation impact of the road improvements that we're doing. This is something that we haven't talked about or shown in previous presentations. We've the intersection of Northwest Street and West Broad Street, the level of service is D&E from the road improvements that we're providing, and the traffic study is showing a 10% reduction in intersection delays during peak hours. Overall level of service is maintained from what is in place for this area without the development. But with the development, we are maintaining that level of service because of the new traffic lanes that we're putting in and the control that we're providing up by Park Avenue and West Street. The intersection of Northwest Street and Park Avenue, we'll be adding Mason Avenue to that intersection, realigning that intersection, adding a traffic signal, adding turn lanes, and the level of service goes to a level CC. And that's an overall improvement from the D that and A. The A is a little bit misleading because there is no stoppage along West Street. The D represents traffic movements from Park Avenue trying to get onto West Street. So there's substantial improvement because of the realignment and the signal and the turn lanes for Park Avenue and Northwest Street. The intersection of Northwest Street and Grove Avenue, the level of service is maintained. The intersection of West Broad Street and Mason Avenue is a level BB because we're going to right in, right out only. The intersection of West Broad Street, where we have the signalized access on the eastern side of the project, the level of service is BB. The intersection of West Broad Street and Spring Street by the church, the level of service is maintained at a BA. And the intersection of Park Avenue and Spring Street, the level of service of that intersection is maintained at an AA. Intersection of Northwest Street and Lincoln Avenue, the level of service is also maintained at an AC. Next slide. This is just the to show how the parking works. You're looking at the ground level at grade with Mason Avenue. The site, as you know, slopes down from the intersection of West Street and West Broad down to the east. So you come into Mason Avenue and you can park in the parallel spots, or you can turn right into that parking field, which is at grade with Mason Avenue. And I'm going to walk you through the commercial parking real quickly. So you can come in at grade there. Next slide. You can go up to the mezzanine for additional commercial parking. This is the level below Mason Avenue, and it's actually at grade where you access the project on the eastern side, the signalized access point on the eastern side. So you come in on the eastern side and you can go directly into that parking field. You can continue down to P1 and have another parking field for retail and for the hotel. All of those parking services are flat parking services. The residential parking, there is an exclusive residential parking lot on P2. And there are exclusive residential parking lots above grade at each level of the apartment building, and folks will be able to access their floor right off of that parking garage. Transportation demand management measures that we are proposing for this site are on-site vehicle sharing program, unbundled parking, bus stop improvements that we're making to the bus stops on West Broad Street at our site, secure and weather-proofed bicycle parking we're doing, information kiosks for transportation. We're providing hotel shuttle to the Metro Rail, TDM website and marketing plan for all of the uses on the site. Real-time transit information and site-based transportation guides will be provided with a transportation coordinator being responsible for that and the website. Live, Work, Play campaign will be put in place. New residential and hotel guest commuter information packages will be given out, and we will be promoting the MWCOG's Guaranteed Ride Home program. Community benefits, we're making cash contributions to the school's library to catch, bike share, and park capital improvements. We're providing the funding for a post-development traffic study. We are going to provide affordable dwelling units on the site. We had previously talked about making a cash contribution, and we've had a couple meetings with Nancy and with Julio and talking about what their goals and objectives are for affordable dwelling units, and have gone back to providing units. And we're going to provide the number of units that is the policy for the city, and we're talking with them now and expect to meet back with them this week to settle on what can work for the percentage of AMI. We're doing a NGBS Silver certification, which is similar to LEED certification for the apartment building. It's an equivalent certification. We're doing a LEED certification or equivalent for the hotel building and the off-site improvements I've alluded to. In addition, we are going to be undergrounding the aerial utilities along West Street next to the WNOD Trail and providing a new sidewalk along the north side of West Street connecting where West Street goes northbound and the Grove Avenue intersection. And that's it.
Okay.
How do I do?
Good. That's
Quick.
good. Okay.
I get a start?
Yes. Mr. Rankin.
All right. I'll start with the same question I always ask, because I noticed in the staff report in a couple different places it makes mention of the site being too dense. So this is partially a question for the staff, but I keep wondering what measure of density we're using, and then what level of density would be acceptable to the folks that have expressed concerns with the density. So I don't know who can answer that, but I noticed, like, in the staff report, there's one part where the staff comments suggest more work to make the project look smaller would be good, but it doesn't necessarily seem to suggest that it actually needs to actually be smaller. But then in lines 573 to 577, it talks about asking for fewer floors to decrease the density. Section lines 711 to 712 talk about reducing the multifamily density, but we don't talk about a target that we're trying to go for. And then lines 917 to 918 refers to the previous requirements from City Council to reduce the residential density and massing to a level that's acceptable to the City Council, but I don't know that anyone has ever expressed what level would be acceptable. So I think I mentioned this the very first meeting we had about this, but there seems to be a lot of concern about the density, but no one seems willing to put a number on it. So I feel like it's hard to ask the developer to hit a number. Now, I will say I don't think the developer has made the thing any smaller or less dense since the first meeting. So one could say they haven't moved on that, but I also don't know why we're not willing to or able to give them a number that they could move to take that issue off the table. I got a lot of other questions, but I don't know if you want to talk about that one first.
Mr. Fuller, why don't you just take a shot at it?
Yeah, I'll, the council, since the project initiation, has, been concerned about the density, and they haven't really defined that other than they look at the residential and 340 units and look at that as a potential to be reduced. Obviously, the commercial is desirable, and so it's all the residential they're looking at. They're also with the density, there's sort of the massing the presence, and I think that's what some of the staff comments in the 500s you're looking at and so forth are addressing. And the applicant has, changed the overall scale and appearance of the project by dividing up the buildings, putting the hotel in the corner, separating that, opening the project up. I mean, originally we were talking about the fortress
Yep.
look, and,
Yep.
and so they've made great strides in that to sort of, and then in the compatibility with the adjacent neighborhood, Park Avenue.
No, I think they've moved the massing around pretty well, but as far as I know, the size has not really changed. So, and I guess one of my questions is just basically, when we talk about density, are we talking about residential units per acre? Are we talking about residential square footage per acre? And how does that compare to, because this is a very big site, and so just looking at the number of units is a way of looking at size, but that's not the density.
Yeah.
The density is number of units for the amount of area we're talking about. So I'm
Yeah.
curious how this compares to Rushmark and Tinner Hill in terms of either residential units per acre or residential square feet per acre, one of those.
Well, the comparison's a little misleading in when you compare to Rushmarks that basically the base zoning there was 20-some feet higher. And so here you're at 55 feet versus 75. And so when you look at a comparable height to that project, you're starting off with a lower base zoning, and they're asking for a bonus 30 feet here and so forth. And so the comparisons aren't quite oranges and oranges.
Okay, that's
I
fine.
guess
Then
is
what?
I'm saying, so.
Then I guess I'm back to what density would the staff not be concerned about?
Yeah, that's, I mean,
What
like
measure?
I said, yeah, I mean, it's been the question all along, and I think with the reductions in, I mean, they've actually reduced somewhat the square footage of the residential slightly, even though they've held the units count, and they've modified those sizes a little bit. So the project still, you know, while square feet wise, the commercials increased with the recent changes. So your ratio's now up to almost 34% commercial. It started off at 28% at the beginning of this project. So I think, you know, by increasing the commercial, you know, I think that's been a positive on that. Getting back to the, I guess, the residential side of it, I think looking at the size of this project and the amount of commercial, which I'm saying is 34%. Rushmark was 19%. You know, you got a big supermarket.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's significant more commercial. And in order to underwrite the land, the hotel, the theater, going underground on that, you know, it's that much commercial, which, you know, the retail itself is 65,000 square feet. That's you know, that's a risk to the developer. So all of a sudden, you know, you've got to have enough residential
Right.
to sort of pay for the amount of commercial that we're getting, which is very positive on this project.
Right.
And it's, you know, it's changed all along. So I guess what I'm saying is this may be the density that's needed to make this commercial work. So
Right.
that's what I'm saying.
And that's what I'm trying to get at. Like, I get the sense that some people, if the developers say, hey, we'll lop off the top floor of residential, I think some people would say, oh, that's a better project. I'm more in favor of it. Now the developer might say, I can't do it, can't afford it. What about half a level? I mean, this is what I'm trying to get. Like, I feel like if the people that are worried about the density had a adjustment in mind, then we could maybe ask the developer to do that, and then they could say if they could do it or not. But as it is now, I think one of the reasons why they haven't reduced it is that there is not a target for them to hit, and therefore reducing it would be a gamble on their part to see if that was the target that we were comfortable with. So I wish we would come up with a number that would work. But
Yeah, that hasn't been the case, yes.
I can move on to other questions. I'll skip a bunch because I'm sure you guys will talk about these. And if you don't, I can circle back. One that I noticed was that I guess other projects and earlier in this project, the proffer for school capital contribution was a per unit amount of $75.11, and that's been changed to $3.75 per square foot of gross residential. I'm wondering what is the appropriate methodology. I mean, I think the point of that is that a project like this will bring additional kids to the schools that will need, that may impact the capital needs of the schools, and we're trying to make sure that doesn't go out of balance, but I don't know which methodology is more appropriate. And then I'm sort of curious how those types of things compare to projects in the area, not necessarily because we should have a similar thing, but just to see how they relate. I mean, I think unlike, for better or worse, Fairfax County or Arlington, we have fewer options for flexibility in our school capital demands. You know, we can't just shift kids to some other school somewhere else in the district. So, but I also think we need to be, if we want developers to build here, we have to be somewhat comparable to the demands of our neighbors. So I was wondering if which methodology we think is better and how we compare our neighbors. And my third question on that is just, and I'm sure this is not practical, but since it is a big question mark how many kids are going to show up, is there any methodology which reassesses the reality of the situation a year or two down the road and readjusts that proffer, or is that completely ridiculous? And I'm getting lots of messages.
Actually, I mean, that's a good question. I guess it's been almost, I want to say 8 or 10 years now. We did a study, the schools did one, contracted with a demography firm that actually did surveys and collected real data based on the resident address and the number of kids at each address. And then they also tracked movement for 5 years. And then we did an inventory of all our residential units and the sizes and typed them: condos, apartments, townhouses, single families. So it was a very, very detailed analysis. And on that, we were able to build, based on the CIP and the number of seats programmed to build new schools, in a factor on a per unit basis by each unit type, what that would be. And so there is a real methodology that built the number of, for example, $7,511 per unit is what we'd started off on, and then there's been a methodology change as we looked at some other options most recently. And so I know staff's trying to get back to that number, and so we're having those
Well, and I know the
discussions.
challenge is we don't have a lot in the city that matches with this format. So we've got Pearson Square, which is apartments, but they're large number of bedrooms and large units. We've got older things like Merrill House, which are old, but they have large units. They have a lot of kids. They're more affordable. We've got North Cape. It's pretty new, and I know the numbers are in for the first year or two, but we don't have a ton of this kind of format. So I know I'm very familiar with all that analysis. I just know we're still, I think, kind of not sure how it's going to pan out.
Well, in terms of projecting the number of school-age children from these projects, we've modified our fiscal impact model with the newer projects and what the numbers are coming in. And Pearson Square was very skewed, but the others are more standard. And so we've been applying that to these projects, and that's why you see the range in the fiscal impact. For instance, this one's like 1.3 to
Dramatic,
2 million. And so that's based on ranging the school impact for the most part in there. And so so we've got sort of the high, low, and the medium built into that 1.3. So it's pretty well covered in there somewhere. It's you're not just picking a single number and having to live
Well, I
with
would
that.
I would say let's really scrutinize the methodology for the capital contributions, because I think that is, I mean, it's clearly something we're facing right now. We've got one school trying to get built up. We've got another one that's probably going to go. So I think we need to make sure we're doing that right.
We actually have the capability of doing that. So if that's, I mean, we do that periodically, but we could update it sooner than later, because we look at both capital costs through the fiscal impact model by modeling the number of seats that for a new school or the ones we just built. So either you're buying into the one we just built, like Henderson, because we had to foot the cost of that. You're going to utilize those, so you're actually buying seats with your contribution. Or we've got a new school coming, let's say the high school or something, and then what is the need for that? We can build that in the model, and then that number changes based on that. The other thing the model does, it looks at the annual cost, and so that's also a factor that's blended into the model. So that 1.3 to 2 million a year already has a factor in for the annual cost of the kids as we go forward. What we're talking about is capital only.
Right. And speaking of that, I see we have identified that the hotel will bring students. And so I have two questions. One, I know one of the reasons why we want a hotel use is because it's generally considered a high net fiscal impact. But I would presume when you factor in that will bring, I think, 4 to 8 or something like that, school kids, because of this type of hotel. How does that affect the hotel as a great anchor? I mean, is it less of a great anchor? And then I don't think there's any capital contributions from the hotel part, but if they're contributing 4 to 8 kids, then it seems like we're missing something there.
If I could,
Yep.
on the VCs, we've already been, our original VC made a per unit proposed capital contribution. We were given a draft of a new format that the city's using for all VCs, which instead of asking for a per unit, asked for it to be expressed in gross square feet. And that's what you saw in the July 24th. And we were also asked to include a contribution for libraries, which nobody else has done so far. We've now been asked to change that back to a per unit contribution for schools, and we've got to balance how to deal with that now, because if we're going to do a capital contribution for the libraries, the issue is where does it come from? And if you know, the current proposal includes $150,000 for parks to be used by the city really however it wants. There's $25,000 for catch, and there's other cash contributions. Those are under essentially final review, so we can come to conclusion on that.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing is happening on ADUs. We've gotten, Peter did a good job to tell you where we are. We're going to have some final discussions to deal with that. But if I could go back to the density question, the density at Rushmark is 107 units per acre. That's about 282. I was looking up on the website, and the land area is 2.63. Tenor Hill is 224 units, a 2.2 acre parcel. That's 109 units per acre. This is 340 units on a 4.2 acre site for 81 units per acre. So the issue of what's the appropriate density? The density is substantially less here, but it is also a function of how you pay for the commercial development.
Yep.
And the commercial development began with essentially a request from the city to include a hotel, and you've explained the dynamics of how you do that financially.
Right.
That then became a hotel and a second anchor, which became the movie theater. And that had to be loaded in, and the movie theater has an enormous cost associated with it, and a retail component, which has not only stayed but has gotten bigger and much improved in quality. And that area now is about 60,000 square feet. So those are 63,000 square feet of retail shops, the movie theater, and the hotel, and the dynamic of supporting those. But that's the evolution. The VCs are, as I said, very close to being finished, and we hope you'll get those soon, and we can get on and have a further discussion whether you think they're adequate or not.
All right. And then my last question is, can you talk about any plans you have regarding the existing businesses on the site and how they may or may not be involved in the new project?
We've talked to many of the existing retailers. Some of them are finding other locations. Yes. Some of them have an interest in coming back into the project, and some of them are uses that really are going to be very important to have in the project, like a bike shop, like a deli, ice cream shop. The question will be,
I'm sure the rent in a place the way it is now have got to be a lot different than what you guys hope to get.
So the question,
and do you have any plans or programs to? I know the special exception. One of the things is I think it's a secondary criteria about local or boutique. I don't forget the terminology they have versus like chains. And I don't know if you guys had any specific programs in mind to support that, or if it's going to be a free market kind of situation.
We don't have any special programs for that, but we are concentrating on regional and local tenants as the main focus of the retail mix. You'll see some national brands of things, but that's going to be on a limited basis. One of the other issues for tenants who are on the site is the amount of time for the construction period and having to close their stores, and so that brings a certain element that's a challenge.
Yep. That's all I got. Thank you.
So Annie covered some of my stuff, but just on the voluntary concessions in terms of that $350,000 cap, I just don't.
It's coming off.
Is it coming off? Because I'd rather just see a list of what you're willing to do.
Yeah, the cap is a very, very difficult way to deal with that for the
Right.
city, and we understand that, and so it's just not practical.
Okay,
So we
it's
take that
definitely
has been
coming off.
removed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I think part of the problem is we've been looking at material in different variations for a long time, and the staff report, that's still listed as an issue. So, yeah, because it just doesn't make any sense for us. You know, I am concerned about the vagueness of your retail project plan, because while I think it's really great that you've doubled the retail space from the first submission almost, you know, it's just the plan is vague. We have these interior spots that are really, like, they're not going to have signage on the street. And it's concerning to me that you have to have a very, for this project to work, we need that retail filled for us monetarily. And you need an aggressive plan here. And I just know that when Pearson went up, we had a lot of difficulty filling that space on Maple, because they said literally, because it wasn't on South Washington, there wasn't enough visibility. And at that time, there was a car dealership there, and you could clearly see the Pearson building. Any signage there, you could see it. And so I think that if we're going, I mean, with that, especially with that interior retail, we need to see some type of aggressive timeline. Like, you know, how are you going to go after people? What kind of situation are you going to have in those spaces? Are they going to be like cold, empty spaces? People have to come in and do a lot of build out. Is there a way are you going to make sure that these spaces have the vent in for, restaurants? You're talking about restaurants. We know in the past we've had trouble where restaurants couldn't go into spaces because it wasn't vented. We've had trouble filling spaces because the build out was so expensive that, they couldn't afford the rents with the build out. We've had people go under because they paid for the build out and then they couldn't afford to keep going. So I'd just like to see something. I mean, this is very nice and it covers all the major issues, but I'd like to see something aggressive about how you're going to fill the space, how you're going to incentivize people to come into it, because this is something Rob Meeks once said to me, and I've always remembered, is that when you get retail space, you'll get a first generation of people go in, and some of them will stay. And you might get a second generation, some of those will stay, but it may take 3 rotations sometimes to get the right mix in there. And part of that is getting people in that can afford that space initially, I know, like, I was recently at the Mosaic, and you're already seeing things go down there, close out, because they're going to re-rotate things through till they actually stick. And so, I think part of the success of that is to get stuff in there in the beginning and get people in there. And we know restaurants can do that. Most of the people I know who go to Mosaic go because they go to restaurants down there. They don't shop down there. They might go to Target, but it's the restaurants that do it. So I just want to see aggressively how you're going to get restaurants in here. And like I said, those interior retail spots are a little scary, because we've had the corner of the Byron wouldn't fill because people said it was too far from parking. And it had street visibility. Yeah, street visibility. Well, part of it is, that could have had a back exit that would have taken them closer to parking, but it didn't. They had to walk all the way around the building. So I want to know that as you design these spaces, you're designing them in a way that's really user-friendly. So, like, one of my questions with the theater is, I'm assuming when you get to that bottom parking area, you can go directly into the theaters from there? Or is it because I know the lobby is actually on the ground level, correct? But if you go down in that sub-parking, can you get into the theater from that direction?
We're purposely, we had a long debate about that. And what we want is for folks to park in the commercial parking areas and to come up onto Mason Avenue. It's our central market street, and we want folks to walk by the restaurants and shops as they go to the theater and learn what's there. It's a very, very important part of the retail plan is where the customer arrives from the parking spot, and we've got elevators bringing them up purposely to Mason Avenue, to the central part of it.
So signage is going to be a big issue for you, to get people to go down there to park and then to take the elevator up. And at Ballston, the way their theater is, they do have signage on those floors telling you this is the best floors for theater parking.
We're going to have some pretty serious wayfinding signs, and we are going to have different types of storefronts to create brand representation on the street front, and signage for the tenants directly on their space, substantial signage.
And I think your websites would have to be mobile enabled and very clear about where parking is.
Yep.
Because I've gone to theaters before where they say they have parking, but they don't really tell you where it is. And sometimes you drive around the block a few times trying to figure out, like Courthouse is one of those places, AMC Courthouse. The first time, I usually take the Metro. The first time I drove there, I couldn't find parking forever. And then finally, I found the entrance.
And that's an old design.
Yeah.
We're talking about commercial space that's together, and there'll be wayfinding signs and elevators getting people to Mason Avenue.
Okay.
That's the whole key.
And then my other thing is, on this NGBS certification, what's the reason for doing that rather than LEED? Is this work better for your situation?
It's a more efficient process. I'm not an expert in it, but many of the multifamily developers are using that certification. It brings the same level of quality as LEEDs, but the process to complete the paperwork and so forth is less expensive and much more efficient.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'd like to see some kind of comparison article,
Sure.
document, or maybe staff could talk to that. Do they think it's equivalent? You know, because I'm not really that aware of it, and as soon as I saw it, I just want to know why the difference.
You are. When we approved the hotel, remember we had that whole work session?
Yes.
It was 4 hours,
Yes, I remember.
12:30.
What about it?
The difference between NGBS.
Ah,
Does no one remember our
I
past
remember it.
meetings? You
I
keep
remember-
me up here. Okay,
I remember.
good.
I remember talking about LEED over and over again, and part of it is when you bring in these other
They
qualifications.
didn't get, I think they retrospectively, recently, they got LEED, but they
Right.
did not build it as that. They built it to the NGBS.
I know, but we weren't very happy with it, and if we're going to be happy with it, you need to prove to us it's worth doing it.
Understand that. And Melissa, if I can answer a couple of your...
This was for a hotel?
Yes.
This is designed strict, NGBS is primarily for homes and residential.
Right.
Using it for commercial, and that's why we didn't proffer it for the hotel.
Well, I just think even, not just for us, but for the public record, it's good to make it clear on that, because it's been a real community struggle to get LEED, not even just for development, but for our own buildings. But the community wants to see this, and so if we're going to bring in a new certification, we need to inform them of it and make them understand the value of it. Otherwise, as far as they know, we didn't get the environmental, level that we should get. And so I just think we need to make sure people understand it. So I have other stuff, but I'm going to let it go.
I wanted to
Maybe you'll cover it down
I
here.
wanted to answer some of your questions if I could.
Okay.
They were good questions about the retail. First of all, as you know, we have Street Sense, who has been hired to design the unit mix of retail and help us with the storefronts. We are putting a lot of funding into the build-outs of the stores, and we have tenant allowances for all of the retail that is probably 3-4 times what you see in the marketplace. With the demographic in this whole market, and with a design that is pedestrian-friendly, open, combined with public space, and with that amount of investment into the retail space. In addition, for the restaurants, I believe we are committing to provide 50% of the retail. 50% of the retail space is going to have access to restaurant vending. So we have put a lot of thought in the planning to be able to go after the kind of retail that we want. This is a lifestyle retail project, and so to get the quality retailers here, which they will come here because the demographic is here, you've got to provide the parking, you've got to provide the investment into the space, you've got to provide the public space, all of that integrated really well. And that's what's going to get the tenants here. And then, of course, for the restaurants to provide sufficient ventilation access. And we're doing it in a large quantity so that it should be clear to the city that restaurants are a big target for this project. This is going to be a food destination. You're welcome.
I don't know where to start, but I've been reading the explanation as to how you meet the primary and secondary criteria. I've read the market assessment, which is the most optimistic thing I've ever read in my entire life. And I do have some questions on several of them. In the criteria area, one of the ways you're saying is it meets our secondary criteria is for undergrounding utilities. But the comment here is underground all area utilities contiguous to the site depending on costs. Now that seems to me to say maybe we'll do it, maybe we won't, depends on how much it costs. We're expecting you to do it.
It's been done. That could be edited
well, then
out.
I think you better start editing.
Well, it's in the VCs. The issue when that was done was whether we were going to be asked to go well beyond the site, which was at one point under discussion. But there's going to be undergrounding on the site, and it's going to include undergrounding on the opposite side of West Street.
I mean,
on the WNOD trail.
The undergrounding on the site is required by code, so that's not even a voluntary concession. The off-site had a cap on it, and the current VCs still have that. So we're looking to get new ones.
Right.
But
well,
the staff report reflects what is currently
on-site,
before us.
I just want to make sure that that's locked in and not
That's locked in. That's not
having to do with cost. Okay. Mr. Lasso, you said the movie theaters have enormous costs associated with. What are those costs?
Peter?
First of all, this theater is being put underground. The soundproofing that goes with the theaters are a substantial cost. The theaters also have wide spaces. Each theater has a wide space, and because you're trying to see a screen, you can't use columns. So you incur substantial cost in providing the strength to the ceiling above.
So construction costs.
Construction costs, substantially more construction costs for a theater than any other use, any other retail use.
And did you consider this when you first offered the theater?
We were asked to go get a theater, but we've considered it all the time. It's been a challenge to push the economics on the theaters to make it work. But a theater brings, on the other side, it brings activation to retail. Theaters are very good anchors to activate retail, and especially in the lifestyle types of retail.
Oh,
so all those
restaurants too.
Yep, and all those factors are there. You know, it's a tightrope. You know, it's a high cost.
So one of the things.
Well, let me just say one last thing. The other thing is that theaters require substantial contributions by the landlord in addition to building their shell space that you don't have with grocery stores and you don't have with a majority of the retail. They have not only high cost to build their space because of the special requirements I said, but they really are uses that get full-service restaurant type tenant contributions. Very, very high.
I'm surprised they would want to build underground then if it's so costly for them to do that. I mean, it would be better to have above ground like at Shirlington, seems to me. But that's not this project. So something that hasn't been mentioned in all the, or in most of the work sessions and meetings that I've been to, is a subsidy for the theater. Can you talk about that a little bit and what you're thinking about that and how it would work?
I think you're referring to the admissions tax that many jurisdictions in the state of Virginia have on theaters. Falls Church has an admissions tax for movie theaters, and we've been talking with the city of how to make the economics work for the theater, and the idea came that that the city could charge a higher admissions tax, and we could get the funds from that admissions tax to support the cost of the theater.
You would get it, or the theater would get it?
Well, not the theater, because the theater's not paying for the construction. We're paying for the construction. So in order to support the financing for the construction.
So we're taxing the movie patrons to build the theater, to help build the theater.
Well, the jurisdictions around the state tax movie theaters for various reasons, income reasons.
I mean, we don't have a movie theater, so
right.
We haven't had a tax on movie theaters for 50 years. I think the only one around here is Alexandria, one theater. Arlington doesn't do it. I just curious how
but it was a
you
way
figure out
that
that's going to work.
And
who's going to collect that?
The genesis from this is the agreement with for where the BJ's is. BJ's is not a party to the sharing of revenue agreement. The agreement is between the city, the Economic Development Authority, and the owner of the site, which is JBG Rosenfeld. And that came up there because, if you remember, the city wanted to have a major retailer at what is now the BJ's site. The owner could not afford to bring the size of the retailer there and make the numbers work. The original occupant was scheduled to be a CarMax auto dealership. And so the end result was a discussion that led to, well, how can the city participate in helping the owner afford to not have a CarMax and instead have a tenant like BJ's. It might have been, there was even examination of the smaller size, Walmart, other types of retailers. And the answer is to share the revenue that comes out of that site. So a percentage of the revenue that comes from that site is split in bands. The first $500,000 goes to the city. This is taxes of all kinds that are collected at BJ's. Real estate, personal property, cigarette taxes, sales taxes. The next band of $500,000 to $1 million roughly is split 50-50 between the city and the owner of the site. And then anything over and above that amount goes to the city. So that deal will last 8 years, and a financial consultant was retained by the city to make sure that there was a need for that type of help. And the answer was yes, the deal was struck, and that's how it was done. So with that as the model, the way that it would work here would be that an admission tax would be paid. There is already an admission tax, but it would be raised because now I think it's 2%, something like that. And it really hasn't been collected in years because I don't think there's any amusements that pay it. It would have been the old State Theater when it was operating. So that tax would be increased, and then a financial consultant has been retained to look at the pro forma for the entire Mason Road development, as well as the movie theater operation, to determine whether or not that type of assistance is required in order for the project to develop the right rate of return so it can go forward. And with that assistance, then a decision would be made as to how high the admission tax would be raised and how much sharing there would be with the owner. And the collection is like any other tax. The tax is collected by the city, assessed by the commissioner, collected by the treasurer. In this case, there is no assessment really. It's just it's a ticket charge. So when you pay for your $9 ticket or whatever the price is, then a piece of
senior
that.
citizen price.
Yes, well, we look forward to it. And it makes a difference.
Not for the matinee.
And in Virginia, as it turns out, cities have the right to assess this particular type of tax. Counties do not. There are some exceptions to that, and so there are 28 jurisdictions in the Commonwealth today that charge admissions taxes. The counties are all asking to get it. They may or may not get it in the future. But that's the mechanism. It's collected. It is distributed. The reason for the Economic Development Authority to be involved is because the authority has the power and to do this type of arrangement. The cities are unclear, frankly, in Virginia law whether they can do it directly, so they do it through authorities. So that's how it would operate, and it's under review now.
Yeah, I imagine it is. Could you do the theater without this subsidy?
The answer is no. It cannot be done without this type of subsidy.
Okay. And as I understand it, the city collects the tax, keeps its 2%, and then gives the developer what's left over to help them pay for the building.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And how long does this go on?
The current discussion is for a 20-year agreement.
20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Base term of the theater.
Lease. Gary, do you know if the BJ tax, whatever agreement we made with that, is that working for us?
I believe so. I mean, the few things I've heard anecdotally, but, yeah.
Maybe Tom Clinton would know better.
Well,
Okay.
And the theater will be paying its real estate taxes and sales taxes and concessions tax. All of that goes directly to the city. We're just talking about the admissions
We're just
tax.
kind of passing money back and forth, sounds like.
Well,
no,
it's only the one tax. It's the admissions tax, and it's a piece of the admissions tax. But the business will pay business and professional license taxes or gross receipts taxes, personal property taxes, if meals taxes because it'll have a restaurant. So it's a policy decision. There's no getting around
And
that.
hasn't been decided yet?
No.
Okay. My next question has to do with, again, the parks. This says, in addition, the proposed development will widen paving and crosswalks, provide a mini park at the WN&OD Trail, which will work to increase pedestrian and bicycle activity in the area. What mini park are we talking about?
The original design had at the corner of Mason Row a very small plaza area, which in the latest revisions is there's going to be a bike share facility there. So it's really less of a park now, but it is still a rather large amenity, but it's not
Like
a park.
That little tree and bike.
Potential bike share.
Potential bike,
Mhm.
okay. Well, I would take that out if I were you. And on the Nova Parks, apparently you've come to an agreement that this is doable. They would like to do it, you would like to do it, the city would like to do it. They can't pay for it. And their last question is, the applicant, not a question, the applicant should fund and construct all improvements depicted on the CDP. So I guess now that the cap is off, would this be something that would be constructed during construction of the project?
It's shown on the CDP, and it will be part of the construction project. The original cap was in there prior to a plenary meeting that was had with the city staff from all the departments affected and the NVRPA. It was unclear until relatively recently precisely what they wanted to do, and the cost was a little unclear. That's all now been examined. The cost implications are now known, and so there is not going to be a cap. The CDP will show in more detail what you've seen on the slides tonight, and that's part of the project.
And do you have any idea of how much it's going to cost to realign that trail?
I don't know the breakout. Peter, I don't know if you do.
Well, if you don't, that's fine. I
well,
expect it's
it'll be in the
350,
budget.
yeah. Okay, I'm going to cede my time, but I do have some other questions about the traffic patterns. One in particular, so maybe I'm not going to cede it right away. One in particular about Northwest Street and the changing of the lanes. That is really problematic to me. I don't know how you're going to work that out, and I think you're going to have to devote a 15 or 20 minutes with a presentation showing us how that's going to work. I don't see how that on West Street is going to
Show me
work.
where you are.
I don't see.
Get that slide up so we understand what you're saying.
I don't see how the left turn going east on the
Back?
project is going to
Yeah.
work.
Okay.
Park and West, you're
No,
talking
Jeff.
about?
I'm talking about West and Broad. West and Broad.
Right there at
Okay.
the corner,
It seems to me,
where you said you gave up some land.
Jeff, if you could go to the slide for the intersection
No.
of West and
Land
West.
down there.
you gave down, laying down here.
We're
Oh,
up here.
okay,
We're up here.
okay. Oh, that one.
On the original plan, this big one, it shows,
Eastern access. Keep coming. Keep coming.
it shows that this area at West and
Oh,
Broad
there. Yeah.
is a certain width, and then on the proposed plan, it shows it at a different width. So I don't want to get into the details on this because I feel as though my colleagues have other questions, but I will have further questions on that.
We're just providing some property to provide enough space to have the left turn lane.
But that
It
is
doesn't look like you're
that is a
providing
great
property. It looks
yeah.
as though you're taking it away.
It's a great question, and it deserves a lot of analysis. And one thing I just ask you all to think about is that one of the issues that as we, as an institution go through these reviews, this is a concept development plan. You will get to make, well, you can certainly talk about it now and ask and go through it as much as you want.
Well, there's no sense in us being surprised at site plan because it isn't the way we want it to be.
That's why I say it's a great question, because we've talked about it with the staff many times, which is we ought to begin thinking about how to load more of the site plan into what you're doing now, because we are truly duplicating the process. But it is a great question. The transportation elements of this project are very important.
Yeah, and the transportation elements, as far as I'm concerned, affects Andy's concern about density, because if we didn't have all these transportation problems here, maybe the density wouldn't be such a problem. But because we have these transportation problems, and then we're adding all these extra people, it magnifies them, and it intensifies them, and I don't see how you can put a number on density when you have so many extra other things that factor into it.
Well, when we'll talk about it, we'll bring in the traffic engineer, and you can go, we really should go through that, because it's been studied, and all of the movie theater particularly was loaded into this. And some of it is counterintuitive, because even having lived here as long as I have, there's really only certain times of the day where the volume of traffic is really the issue. And then there's safety issues that are evident regardless really of the volume that are caused, and actually our slide is incorrect. There are 15 or 16 different points to get in and out of this site with curb cuts now that we've added another site. So all that goes away, but we really should go through that, and we'll provide the expert to you.
Cindy.
Okay. When do you think we're going to see a new copy of the concessions? Because it seems like everything, information we came in here with tonight is not there.
We're committed to have them. We've got a meeting with EDA October 6th. We're committed to have them finished by that time.
So I'll be there at that meeting because I'm liaison to that group. And with the capital contributions, you're still working between our regular per unit and some other system that the city proposed, or did
No,
you
no,
propose
that,
it?
to
You
be,
talking about ADUs?
I'm
no,
talking
to be
about
clear.
capital contributions for the schools.
Right, the new form reorders the way that the paragraphs are laid out. And one of the changes it made is it went away from a per unit contribution and asked that the contribution be expressed in a per square foot.
And that came from the city?
Yeah, and I think.
Because I did not understand, I heard that it came from you guys.
No, it didn't come from us. It came from the city. And in trying to work with it, I think we both now see that it doesn't work very well. So it's better to go back to the per unit program. And so we have to do that, but we have to deal with the magnitude of the per unit contribution. It is currently $75.11 per unit for rental apartments. It's less if you did a condo. And we just have to see where we are in that number.
Right. And to be fair, because we got to deal with the capital impact, that's why it's a big number.
Without a
Right.
question. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Also, I understand you're going to be talking again to Housing and Human Services about the ADUs, because I'm liaison to that group, and they like the 6%, but they did not like the percentage of AMI.
And we're
Okay?
working on that.
So you're working
We're
on
going to
that.
get back with them and try to come to some
And so the
understanding.
$350,000 cap is gone, but exactly how are all those costs going to be all on your side of or is the city going to have to do any of the costs on their side for all the street improvements and all? Because that's very intensive, and I understand the expense of that, realigning everything. Is the city going to be it's all in your plate?
Correct.
It's all in your plate. And so, okay.
There's a lot on our plate.
Yeah, there's a lot, there's definitely a lot of that. I just want to say the mix of units, I think, is really good. You've got the one bedroom, 65% from, I hope this is the latest information, I don't know, 65%, and the two bedrooms, 35%? Is that the same mix?
Sounds about right.
And then out of those one bedrooms.
There's one bedrooms.
The one bedroom,
and then
170, and one bedroom with an office, which is 51, and then 119 two bedrooms.
That sounds about right.
Okay. And the square footage is all on this, but I just wanted to, so that mix is quite good as far as the percentage, particularly with two bedrooms. You brought up, or we brought up, the mosaic. I went on a walking tour with planning, American Planning Association group with the mosaic, and it was really pointed out to us that the distinctive storefronts were very, very important, and I would like to see somewhere there's no information in all this and that about what this might look like, the demarcations of the different stores, because I do think that's extremely important. And I think even on the 100, 200 block, if we didn't have the straight canopies all the way down and had colorful individual, it'd be much more attractive and much more open to business. Mr. Snyder, I'm going to bring you in on a question here. Could you please, we're getting a lot of questions, a lot of comments about the possibility of the replica train station and the public restrooms in it. Is that being considered at all during this process? Or is that just something that you're thinking of for somewhere else? And then also to you all, are there going to be any public restrooms available within the project? So that's a couple different.
That hasn't been determined yet.
Well,
Public bathrooms.
I
Well, they're
think
public bathrooms, but you mean bathrooms that are not
within a
designed
restaurant.
for the
Yeah.
patrons of the tenant.
Because that's come up quite a bit, and we've heard, people speaking at our meetings quite a bit about latrines, potties, and restrooms, and I'd like to have some settlement on that.
Yes, I think I've mentioned, this has come up once before. In looking at the WNOD trail, one of the things we have talked about is the need or the desirability for the city having more of a representation of the historical nature of the railroad and its presence here. It is the WNOD Regional Railroad Park, and many of the communities have managed to retain their stations, and they use them for a variety of
Short
purposes.
and sweet, though, because I know.
So the main topic there was, this is where the West Falls Church Station, a very modest building, was. And they thought, I think it's been talked about in previous years, that a place for history or a place for a visitor center, some kind of a location that could help make this a place, because it was an important intersection between Route 7 and the railroad. The thought of a bathroom is something that, could happen there, but that's not the main purpose behind building something like this. It's to help create a place. And if you go to other places, Herndon, Vienna, Purcellville, you'll see their stations, which create a really wonderful place. So it's an idea. It has to do more with the WNOD.
But that's not in this.
It's not in this.
Mesa
It is
Road
not
plan.
part of this proposal, per se. There also was a station at East Falls Church, a more elaborate
Right.
station that was technically in the county. One point it was within the larger city. So it's really more of the idea of, do we care about that history, and is that a feature that we'd like to somehow, in some form, bring back to the city to help do placemaking?
And, I think along that line with any public restroom, is there any area, since this is an important area, with the new development, to have a kiosk of some type of information for within the city? I don't know if there's been any little proposal for just a little nook and cranny. We don't have any place for, information about the city and what's available and what to do and along that line.
We've had some conversations with the Catch organization about things like that.
I'm also liaison to that.
Okay.
So
And some type of kiosk that would promote the festivals that the city has and
Okay.
things like that.
Okay. And Mr. Let's see. I'm going to throw this back over to you, Gary.
Okay.
And to Mr. Snyder. We have asked quite often about what has been done to help with finding new places for the businesses that are there. We've heard very many sundry bits and pieces. Could we, by any chance, get some sort of a document or information from the EDO office about what has been done and what has been offered, and the working possibilities that I would really like to know if we have made efforts to help and places that would be appropriate and available, and what has been the reaction to that, because I think that's something that's been knocked around and, quite a bit. But I also want to align myself with Melissa with all her statements about, the businesses and everything, because that's very important. But I would like to see more on the storefronts. Okay?
All right, I'm going to try to be pretty quick. We've covered many of the questions I had already. The one part I wanted to touch upon, which I don't think has been addressed so far, is the Park Avenue side. This is a big change we've seen. I think it's a big big improvement. It looks like it's 3 stories along Park Avenue, and they have a townhouse design. Are these actually townhouses, or they just have this look?
Be vertical.
It's just a
Horizontal.
townhouse look there, apartments, rental apartments.
Horizontal apartments, right?
Correct, correct.
There was some comment in the staff report about making these look more like townhouses. Has that been addressed to you in terms of the not even functionally being townhouses, but adding stairs or other
Just saw
elements?
that today. Just saw that today.
Yeah.
Because of the way the site slopes down, we've looked at door, what we call walk-ups. It creates the need for substantial extensions of stairs into towards Park Avenue.
I'm actually
really
not sure how it would work. I just was
it would
curious if you
really
had considered
break
it.
up the appearance with a lot of stairways to, especially as you come to the part of the site. You've got about a 10-foot drop there, or something like that, 12-foot drop. So we tried that, and we started to see just too many bulky stairwells to achieve that goal.
We also got a positive response on this from the
Right, right.
from the standpoint of it not being activated. So
I actually tend to agree that I don't know that it should be activated. I just saw it in the staff report and wondered if you had considered it because we hadn't heard anything about it.
We have.
So I agree. This is. But let me first say this is a big improvement. I know the questions we're asking you tonight is about issues we have, but I have to say this has come a long way, and much of the items that I took notes on the previous meetings and have continued to track have been addressed, and I think this is a very large improvement over what we've seen, both in terms of articulation, in terms of the overall sort of lack of fortress look that seems to be the words we've been using here, improved traffic flow, dealing with the trash. There's a variety of the Park Avenue thing, probably first and foremost, moving the parking garage off of that and hiding it within the building. So while you do hear lots of concerns here, and I know we've talked about them as a planning commission, I do think much of this is improved, and really I'm pleased with what I see overall, for sure. There's obviously some density issues and retail plans. I think the concerns here are very real, but from where we came from 6 iterations ago, I'm much more pleased with what's before me than I was previously. So I do want to give you credit for that.
I would give credit some to the community and to the city itself. We have had several meetings with community members, and I'd like to say that we were smart enough to come up with all these ideas ourselves, but quite honestly, there have been along this very long process, there's been a lot of good suggestions, and it's caused us to rethink some things and really give a shot to what people were trying to achieve, and I think that's what has resulted in this final submission.
Yeah, and look, I think that's clear. I mean, you don't have to have the ideas yourself, but you were willing to listen, and hopefully we can address some of these other concerns as well. I don't want to say that we've reached perfection here, but it's a excellent effort compared to where we were.
And I would, Russell, would like to say one thing on that line. We've had a lot of discussions with Public Works in the city about traffic issues. We have a traffic study. And a lot of these road improvements have been from those meetings, a lot of give and take about how to make the road system, which is not designed well even as it sits today, and really how we could make a difference with some historical problems and at the same time improve the capacity and the controls so that the level of service is equal to or better than what currently is on the roads today. And the traffic study with the road improvements that we are proposing proves that out. And we'd love to talk in more detail at the right time about that.
Okay. I know this is not a site plan for sure, but I typically like to take a look and find out where the transformers are on this project. on one of the sheets, it appears that it's underground. And these transformers, especially on a project like this, can be quite enormous and unsightly. So I think I'm reading that it's underground with access panels at grade, but I want to make sure that that's correct, because I don't see them anywhere else.
That's correct.
Great. The other thing is that I had saw that the height calculation was 81 feet, and you're asking for 85 feet. And we had an earlier issue about penthouse area or some other areas that might extend above 85 feet. One, why 81 feet? And make sure I'm reading that right on the plans. And two, what's happening with the other four? And are we maxing out at 85?
I saw an average of 85 somewhere in there, too.
Well, no, Russell, you're reading it correctly. We were thinking for a long period of time about having some penthouse style on the top floor, which had lofts in them, and they were units that were tall, and so we were reaching the 85-foot special exception limit. But we've decided not to do that, and because of that, the height that we're using now is 81 feet.
Okay. Is there any part of the structure that's going to be above 85, like a mechanical penthouse? Okay.
A Verizon cell phone tower.
Are there? Will be greater than 85 feet.
It might be. It might be probably at 85 feet.
Well, now that we're at 81, Jeff.
I'm sorry.
Well, now that we're at 81.
Correct.
You know.
You probably still be under the 85 feet.
Okay. Yeah, those are my real questions that other than that have been asked, so let's move it along.
Okay, I have, like everybody else, a whole raft of questions, but I want to quickly cover just a couple of things. Just because I was at the meeting, which also went really long, and then we had to revisit it 3 times. So Pearson Square retail, the issue with Pearson Square retail always was how the city defined retail. And I would suggest to you that when we allowed Body Dynamics, which I think we were about 15 months ahead of the city council in suggesting that they may need to loosen up the definition of retail, we had to go through the special exception to allow a very successful tenant who is very successful both financially and I think as a draw to the city. So I would suggest to you that in your retail plan, the notion that the city, and I'm going to get to this in just a second, that the city is suggesting that this needs to be X or Y or Z kind of use, that is not coming from anyone sitting here. As far as I know, I've sat, I think, through these meetings, and although the EDC is a fantastically undemocratic process, in any of those meetings, I never heard the city say that there had to be a specific tenant, a specific anchor. Here's what I've heard. There had to be a certain viability to this commercial, and if you have chosen to say that that's a theater because that's a good use for you, that's fine. But defining this as the city, I want to meet that city because it's not this city. We're taxpayers. We're citizens of the city. We're the planning commission. I have never been in any meeting that someone has suggested that if this project doesn't have a theater, it's not viable. Let me finish the statement before you jump in. I've never been in that meeting to someone who was probably going to vote for this project anyway. So the suggestion somehow that the city writ large is requesting any of these uses, it's not true. And I refer this specifically with the idea that we're looking at this retail plan and then the reference to Pearson Square, because I think that takes all the history that we've had from these mixed-use projects and just pretends like none of it has ever happened and we haven't had to sit through these interminable meetings talking about Pearson Square and some of these other projects. I would also add to this that if this is 50% restaurants, it does make the transportation issues more relevant. I wasn't going to go with problematic, but more something we would pay a closer attention to. I would also suggest to the people in this room that if 50% of this project is restaurants, there is somewhere a tipping point where the existing restaurants may not do that well, that we are going to reach the limit of our capacity for
Clarendon.
restaurants.
Clarendon.
Well, and so tenants fail, tenants come and go. I mean, to a certain extent, that's what happens in the world, but I don't know that we're that excited by it. I'm going to come back to...
Can I interrupt you and answer that?
No, because I'm going to come back to this because I have some questions about it. But I wanted to hit both the density question, which we've gone through. I wanted to hit the Pearson Square and the commercial stuff because, again, I've been on the Planning Commission 7 years. We stay up later than people should talking about these issues, and then it's almost as if we haven't had these things happen to us in the past. Here are my specific questions. Can you tell me the square footage of the Market Square? I'm on page A1.4.
Market Square is, I believe, 90 feet by 110 feet. Is that right?
90 by 110, I think. Yeah. So that's 9,900 square feet of grass, or
that's
from
between
building face to building
face to building face.
It's about 10,000 square feet, just the Market Square portion.
Can you think of something it's the equivalent of? Like, is it like where Mad Fox has their beer fest, which is from building to building? Is it like that big, or?
I think it's, if I were to guess, I'd say it's probably the same length, but I would say it's probably a little bit wider. I want to say that's maybe 85 feet, maybe, because there's just there's a traffic medium in the middle. Isn't that right? With just one-way traffic.
Well, but it's a smooth curb that allows for you to move back and forth.
It's a transitional curve or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's probably like 80 feet or so. So ours is probably a little bit wider.
Okay.
Mason Avenue or?
She asked about where Mad Fox was.
I was saying trying to get an equivalent feel for it, because like with the whole Mad Fox building, the sketches for that made it feel much bigger than when it was actually built. So I just want to get a visual for it. We're talking about something maybe a little bit wider, about the same length as that.
Pretty close, yeah.
So we know what it is.
It's comparable, I would say.
But this is more.
It's more open.
But this is more open because there is no drive-in through this park, right?
Correct.
Okay.
All right. 9,900 square feet. What, the home to home, can you, the architecture, sort of the nature of that, is it going to be similar to the one that's in Philadelphia by the convention center, if you know?
The home two?
Yeah.
No, it'll be.
Similar in what, architecture? Or?
Yes.
It'll be using different materials. So the architecture will be a little bit different.
They'll be using different materials to correspond to the other buildings?
Yes, to correspond to the architecture for this project. What's similar to Philadelphia are the color schemes, the granite gray and the tan colors. But you're looking at brick here.
Okay, fine. They have the green. It's okay. The ephes on the kind of the upper story doesn't look that great, particularly based on the location. It's near the convention center if you're ever in Philadelphia.
Okay.
Can you walk me through very quickly the just the square footage, the floor plate of this building?
Of the office building?
No.
No, that's retail.
That's retail.
Okay. Okay. What, let me see which one you're pointing to. Which number is that?
So A14, right?
Yeah, that's this one here, the 23.
23,203.
So how are you envisioning, what's your split? Is your split, how much courtyard space, and just in this specific building are you, how much of it is interior and how much of it is street facing?
It will be facing Mason Avenue. So we're looking at restaurants along Mason Avenue. We're looking at restaurants, an organic market, and some retail services or shops facing West Broad Street.
So a market would be Pier?
Yes. Going back.
Restaurants,
Correct.
littler restaurants would
Exactly.
be here.
So they can utilize, the restaurants are there to utilize the wide sidewalk for Mason Avenue. That's provided by Mason Avenue.
On the interior.
Yeah, we want small shop activity on Mason Avenue, especially around the market square.
So small shop meaning restaurant or
Restaurants
small shop?
and boutique shops and those kinds of things. Meaning you don't want a big grocery store, for example, that takes up a bulk of the street frontage. You want a lot of activity on the street, so we want small restaurants and small shops.
Yeah, all right. So, okay. So, just walk me through the logistics of, specifically walk me through the logistics of the theater. What would happen if, when is this theater tax going to hit relative to our approvals of the special exception?
The theater the admissions tax would be agreed upon.
Well, it should be agreed upon. It's an ordinance. It only takes a first reading and a second reading, so it takes about 6 weeks total. I don't know when the city's going to have it scheduled, but they're reviewing it now.
Well, so you can't build the theater without the tax, is that?
Not possible. Mm-mm.
So do you know when that issue is before the council?
Well, they're going to control that, but we'd like to, I mean, you could approve the zoning approvals, but it seems to me it ought to track it very carefully. The way the tentative schedule is for this zoning approval is
Well, I seem
December
to remember
14th.
a very stern lecture from one Mr. Dave Lasso that revisions to this project do not need to go through other readings, and if you can't do the theater, isn't that a revision to the
Well,
project?
that's my point. In other words, you could approve it, but if you wait to do the admissions tax and don't get an admissions tax, then it's unbuildable. You'd have to come back and change it. So I would like to see this admissions tax ordinance be adopted at the same time that the special exception and the rezoning are approved.
Well, actually, there's no reason the ordinance can't be changed even prior to that.
Well, or before.
Yeah.
But by December 14th, which is currently the date for the council's action on the rezoning and special exception.
Well, so we're gonna spend let's just take all the time on this project and look at that as just a sunk cost, just a good time we've had together. So we're now gonna spend how much more time on this project with the acknowledgement that it's unbuildable without this theater tax, which is
Well, I don't see it
mildly
that way at all. I mean,
controversial.
I don't know how else you do it. The council needs to see real plans for a real project. This is it. Then they can have their consultant review it, which is underway, and they should be done simultaneously. I mean, I really don't know how else you do it.
Well, okay, so now I had the opportunity to speak at this at some length at the beginning. I'm curious who from the city is suggesting, who is this city who is suggesting that the theater is a critical part of this project? Well, okay, so that is one of 7 votes.
Well, it first came from citizens, actually. The original mention of the theater came from a citizen, didn't it?
Okay, so a citizen and a city council member now constitute the city of Falls Church.
Well, but then I think
Is that your suggestion?
That's not my suggestion, but I knew the first time we saw a mention of theater, it was in comments coming from citizens, but then certain council members liked the idea and it was promoted.
And I've heard council members say that they would not approve it without it.
Right. So it's spread, this desire
Right, we
for the
don't,
theater.
we're not trying to argue with you. I mean, I just think it's a reality. We were told in no uncertain terms, you must have a second anchor. The second anchor, which at one point was a drugstore, was unacceptable and it was removed. The really, you sort of run out of what are potential second anchors. The movie theater was a concept that had been discussed many areas. That's what, let's just put it this way, that's certainly our takeaway, that if this doesn't have a movie theater, it's not going to be approved.
2 first readings ago, a second anchor was a condition.
Well, okay, so, all right, we're not going to sit here and idly speculate. Okay, so all right. All right. I got it. All right. Thank you very much.
And thank you.
Thank you. Have a very good evening. Thank you to everyone who came.
It really has been a pleasure. Thank you, seriously. It's good to get it moving along.
It's all right. All right. Thank you. All right. That's it.
Is our
Public hearing?
October 19th.
October 19th,
Yeah, and let me get back to you on that.
Oh, you can move it.
No. So I just have no intention on having an idle public hearing to discuss this until this is resolved. But maybe it will be resolved.